Chapter 1603. Han Fei would like to challenge a half-king again. This would help him realize his current strength. However, Yu Qian'ai didn't want to fight with Han Fei. They were both half-kings. Han Fei had left the range of the Forest of Horrors and blocked the way. However, this also made Yu Qian'ai realize the attitude of the Forest of Horrors more clearly. Yu Qian'ai felt that the fake king of the Forest of Horrors must have transferred the experts who were familiar with the Blackblood City away. They even arranged for a half-king expert who had never shown up in Blackblood City to come out. However, this made Yu Qian'ai even more certain that something must have happened in the Forest of Horrors. Moreover, they had made such a big noise that they refused to meet with Blackblood City. This was not a good sign. As Han Fei said, Blackblood City didn't gain any advantage in the life and death gorge in the Immortal City. Nearly 100 venerables had died. Under such circumstances, they couldn't afford to offend the Forest of Horrors. Yu Qian'ai smiled faintly. Since Your Excellency Darkness has made it so clear, it would be rude of me to ask again. However, I still have to say that Blackblood City is much more powerful than you think. Seeing that Yu Qian'ai didn't want to fight, Han Fei didn't provoke Yu Qian'ai and insisted on fighting with him. That would be too deliberate. He didn't know what secrets the Forest of Horrors had. However, he was sure that he had aggravated the stalemate between them and Blackblood City. Seeing Yu Qian'ai leave without hesitation, Han Fei asked, "Did he really leave?" The old turtle said yes. Han Fei curled his lips, but he didn't leave in a hurry. Han Fei took out the 9-palace ruler of fortune and calculated his fortune. He saw a tie lot. This meant that there should be no special accidents today. Han Fei didn't plan to kill for a while. Therefore, this infiltration was just a simple one. His purpose was to find the other Tai Chi eye of the heaven and earth natural array. Then, he would take the dragon's head, swallow the dragon's soul, and become a mid-level venerable. That was the most important thing. Half a day later, when Han Fei saw the seaweed wall, he narrowed his eyes. The seaweed wall here was much larger than the one in the Level 3 fishery. Most notably, the Level 3 fishery had seaweed walls instead of seaweed. The difference of a single word was like the difference between heaven and earth. The main plants in the Seaweed City wall were all kinds of seaweed. Within the wall of seaweed, the main plant was seaweed, followed by seaweed. At a glance, Han Fei found that the seaweeds here were made of dozens of different types of seaweeds intertwined. This seaweed wall was at least 1,000,000 kilometers wide. Above the seaweed wall was the seaborne prairie. Similarly, the sea grassland here was much more terrifying than the one in the Level 3 fishery. In the Level 3 fishery, it was a place full of poisonous barriers like a reed marsh. On the other hand, there were all kinds of mouths on the seaborne prairie. Some were like straws, some were like man-eating flowers, and some had furry tentacles. In the sky above the seaborne prairie, small swirls of spiritual energy were rising one after another. Han Fei exclaimed, "Old Yuan, these seaweeds are really edible. According to this method, these seaweeds will leak much more energy than that so-called void storm in Blackblood City." The old turtle was confused. It can't be that simple. With such a vast sea region, how many experts would be created if they followed this method of absorption? Go in and have a try. Before, Han Fei could only cross the seaweed wall by going underground or by force. However, it was obviously inappropriate for low-level cultivators to enter this place. Here, even the plain-looking seaweeds were not low-level creatures. Name venomous tooth seaweed. Introduction: a mutated seaweed that has been contaminated by impure energy for a long time. The venomous tooth seaweed is self-aware and has a brain. It can release poisons according to the abnormal movement of the water and unleash its fangs, causing a range of poisonous barriers to stimulate and alert other seaweeds of intruders. Level 68, quality, rare, mutated, spiritual energy greater than 9,883 points. Effect: inedible, collectible, venomous tooth, absorbable. Han Fei glanced at the seaweeds and found that the entangled dozen or so seaweeds were basically of the same level as the venomous tooth seaweed. Some released poison, some paralyzed the nerves, some created illusions, some corroded the soul, and some parasitized them. In short, there were all kinds of them. Among them, there was an explosive seaweed. Its algae leaves were like curled up little hammers. Once it discovered an enemy, it would immediately explode, and its strength was not weak either. The stronger ones could reach the power of an explorer. And these were the demonic plants that Han Fei saw with the naked eye at the outermost edge. Once he entered it, there would be countless creatures like the divine seaweed octopus. After all, it was easy to hide a few kinds of aquatic animals in such a terrifying seaweed wall. Of course, no matter what, it couldn't stop Han Fei now. After all, under the Gemini divine technique, Han Fei was like mist and water, and he was a mass of pure darkness. As long as he didn't make any noise, even if he stuck close to the seaweeds, they wouldn't find him. Han Fei soon discovered why there were so many suckers on the surface of the sea. It was because there were also void cracks in the seaweed wall. Once a void crack appeared, a large area of seaweeds would be shredded. And in order to make new seaweeds grow, a lot of spiritual energy was needed. 3 days later, in order not to make the slightest noise, Han Fei sneaked in the seaweed wall for 3 days and 3 nights. Fortunately, Han Fei could interforge the universe to rest. Otherwise, even with the Gemini divine technique, it would be difficult for Han Fei to cross the dense seaweed obstacle so perfectly. In the seaweed wall, although the old turtle sensed the existence of a powerful creature, it was not on Han Fei's route. Therefore, Han Fei didn't pay any attention to it. However, at this moment, when Han Fei was about to leave the seaweed wall, he encountered a venerable realm creature guarding it. Han Fei took a deep breath. The seaweed wall covered such a large sea area. Why did he encounter a venerable realm creature? Perhaps for plants, nothing was impossible. After all, Han Fei had been with the water fairy for a long time and knew that the various life characteristics of demonic plants were very unique. At this moment, the weird demonic plant that Han Fei saw was called void vine. This demonic plant, only part of it was exposed in the seaweed wall, and most of it was in the void. It looked extremely weird to the naked eye, like a vine that was cut off from nowhere. At least for ordinary cultivators, they didn't know the concept of the void, so they must think that this thing was broken in half. Maybe they even thought that it was their chance when it was dying. Fortunately, Han Fei could still read its information. Name Void Vine. Introduction. This is a vine that grows in the void cracks. It is born to control the great way of the void and can freely grow in reality and in the void. It is good at the art of void exchange and the Tao of void loss. It is good at spatial rifts and void piercing. Because of its mutation, its vines contain highly toxic. Level 84, quality, legendary, variant, great way, unreadable, effect, inedible, collectible, void liquid, unabsorbable. As soon as Han Fei read this information, he heard the old turtle say, "This is a void vine, a rather rare demonic plant that can use part of the great way of space. This kind of creature doesn't have a body shape. Maybe one of its tentacles grows here, and the other grows thousands of kilometers away. It can even cross tens of thousands of kilometers. Because of this, the void vine is very difficult to hunt. If you can kill this kind of thing, you'd better kill it as soon as possible. Once this thing grows up, it will be a headache." Han Fei said helplessly, "How to kill it? You said that its body can cross tens of thousands of kilometers. No matter how fast I am, I can't cross tens of thousands of kilometers in an instant." The old turtle sneered. "Yes, huh?" The old turtle said, "I'll teach you later. Anyway, you can't kill it now, so it's useless to learn it. Slow down a bit. The void vine is extremely sensitive to spatial changes. This thing might even be able to sense your body of darkness." Han Fei couldn't help but chuckle. "Fine, you can hide it all you want, but I'm going to take it anyway. If I can't cross tens of thousands of kilometers in an instant in the future, let's have a chat." The body of the black fog quietly passed through the void vine. Just when Han Fei was about to cross it, a large section of the void vine's tentacles suddenly drilled out. Han Fei immediately dispersed and turned into tiny particles of invisible dust. Han Fei's speed changed from the fast speed just now to that of a mayfly, floating in the seawater very slowly. Han Fei was very suspicious. Did this thing notice me? After half an hour, the void vine finally retracted its vines, and Han Fei was hundreds of kilometers away. Han Fei couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Phew, a mid-level, venerable realm demonic plant actually almost discovered my existence? The old turtle said, demon plants observe the world in a different way from other creatures. The so-called five senses of human beings, as well as some senses that you humans can't feel at all, may be perceived by demon plants. Han Fei said, I think you'd better pray that I'm lucky at this time. Crossing the seaweed wall, Han Fei saw a gloomy, weird, dark green world. Han Fei saw a kind of weird demon plant, like the twisted jungle on the Scattered Stars Island. These demon plants covered all the places in front of him, forming a forest. The dense, palm-sized, dark green leaves would occasionally fall. Then, one leaf would break into dozens of pieces. Han Fei felt that it would be more beautiful if they turned into peach petals. It seemed that there were not many mobile demon plants in this forest of horrors. After all, demon plants were different from humans. They were plants, just like the dark green trees that Han Fei saw. Each of them was an explorer, and each of them could be regarded as a treasure. At this moment, Han Fei was swimming in the middle of this forest. Suddenly, the seawater trembled. Han Fei didn't feel anything and directly asked the old turtle, Old Yuan, what's wrong? The old turtle said, Energy, bim, in the next moment, a tide of energy directly sent Han Fei flying. Shoot, there's a lot of energy, but it's extremely messy. I even feel the air of death. What's this? The old turtle said, Someone is coming. Han Fei frowned and immediately stopped asking questions. However, after a few minutes, Han Fei saw a giant tree above his head. However, to Han Fei's shock, that thing didn't seem to be a tree, but more like a big octopus with a bark appearance. Han Fei could even see the suckers clearly. This giant tree was no more than 500 meters tall, and its vines, or tentacles, were 3,000 meters long and 10,000 meters long. Wow, it's so big. Han Fei took a closer look, and information popped up in his eyes. Name, Dragon Octopus Tree. Introduction, a mutated dragon octopus tree with a trace of dragon bloodline. Because of the impure energy it absorbs all year round, its life state is between half alive and half dead. This state can prolong its life. The dragon octopus tree is good at dragon stings, and its suckers have many sharp teeth. It can strangle experts who are several times stronger than itself. Level 86, quality, legendary, mutated, path, unreadable, effect, inedible, collectible, dragon octopus, wood, unabsorbable, Han Fei said in surprise. Another one. Huh, he seems to be in a hurry. First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1604. Because the dragon octopus tree was stirring a lot and raising tides, Han Fei took the opportunity to get a free ride on it. The dragon octopus tree suddenly appeared in the middle of the energy tide and seemed to be in a hurry. If Han Fei had been a bit slower, he would have missed the ride. This dragon octopus tree might be huge and stupid, but its speed could be described as extremely fast. The octopus head sprinted like a missile, breaking through the water and coming out of the void in the next moment. A minute later, someone said, Dragon octopus, be quiet. I might think that the Demon Beast Alliance has invaded. It was a weird serpent that spoke. However, it was a vine that had grown into the shape of a serpent. On its head, there was a curved horn that extended to its back. It was 100 meters long and appeared next to the dragon octopus tree. The dragon octopus tree quickly shrank and didn't stop shrinking until it was about 300 meters long. He said, Oh, Serpent Man, long time no see. Han Fei was lost for words. Damn it, you're in the same place? Long time no see? You sound like you're separated by 1,000 mountains and rivers. Also, isn't the name Serpent Man a bit too familiar? Serpent Man hissed. Dragon Octopus. Your memory really isn't that good. We've met 6 times this year. Such a powerful tide of energy had already erupted 6 times this year. Regular energy tides can't wake me up at all. It was only because of your loud commotion that I was woken up. The dragon octopus tree said, "Oh, really?" I sensed boundless energy. Serpent Man smiled. 6 times a year. The holy altar must have been crowded. Are we going to transform into human beings? The dragon octopus tree said slowly, "No, we're going to transform into human beings and eat slowly." Hearing their conversation, Han Fei was puzzled. It's just an energy tide. What's wrong with 6 times a year? The old turtle said, "Here we go again." In the next moment, the energy tide came at them again. At that moment, the 9 tentacles of the dragon octopus tree spread out at the same time, like a large net. The countless suckers on the tentacles bloomed for a moment, and they were filled with sharp teeth. A huge amount of energy was sucked into the body by these suckers. It was the first time that Han Fei had seen this way of devouring energy. With such a huge body, wouldn't the amount of energy it consumed exceed the limit of what this thing could handle? The old turtle said they are spiritual plants and can absorb a lot of energy. If he had excess energy, he could just use it to grow. Therefore, they grew up quite quickly. When these demon plants cultivate, they consume a lot of energy. Han Fei said leisurely, "Yes. The mouth of the giant python next door is like a black hole." Along the way, Han Fei found that when he passed through the dark green forest, all the plants he saw spread out as much as possible to absorb energy. Any energy ripple that passed through the seaweed wall would basically be eaten up. Even if it did, it wouldn't dissipate too much. Along the way, Han Fei also saw the sea bamboo man, the poisonous dragon sea urchin, the colorful sponge. These strange mutant venerables were all on their way. Han Fei was surprised to find that the plants here were all mutant creatures. This kind of mutation completely turned them into complete monsters. They became freaks that were neither plants nor animals. However, the strength of these creatures couldn't be underestimated. In short, after crossing millions of kilometers along the way, Han Fei had encountered more than a dozen venerable demon plants. At this moment, Han Fei, who had been attached to the dragon octopus tree, was listening to a group of demon plants talking. Serpent Man said, "Everyone, since the frequency of outbursts in this holy altar is so high, let's just stay here and cultivate around the holy altar." A colorful sponge that had no eyes and no mouth and looked like a ball responded, "Many people have already done that." A humanoid old man carrying a bamboo and wearing a straw hat said, "It's not necessarily a good thing to cultivate outside the holy altar. The violent energy at the beginning is too heterogeneous, and it's easy to intensify the mutation and lose yourself." A woman with a purple wreath on her head sat on the dragon octopus tree at some point and smiled leisurely. "It's not very far anyway. Besides, most of the time, it's the Blood King who cultivates there. Who wants to see him every day?" Listening to their conversation, Han Fei immediately realized that the holy altar was the place where the energy tide broke out. However, Han Fei sensed it again and still felt that the energy tide was too messy. It was like the waste that was thrown out after the pure energy was extracted. Cultivating under this kind of energy every day, it would be strange if these demon plants didn't mutate. After a moment, when Han Fei followed the dragon octopus tree and the other demon plants to the so-called holy altar, he was dumbfounded. Han Fei and the old turtle exclaimed in their hearts at the same time, "Another array eye?" Han Fei was stunned for a long time. He had been searching high and low for it, only to find it by chance. Han Fei had planned to find it with the nautical panorama. Who could have known that he would reach the array eye of the heaven and earth nature array as soon as he entered the Forest of Horrors? This huge array I was exposed in the Forest of Horrors, about 10,000 kilometers in diameter. Han Fei knew that the real array I was definitely much larger than this. What he saw in front of him was just the appearance of the array outside. He heard the old turtle said, "You must be a bit careful. There are a total of 58 demon plants near this array eye. Among them, 4 are at the half-king realm. This doesn't include those demon plant experts who can compete with you in terms of strength. As soon as the old turtle said that, Hanfei saw a tremendous amount of impurities spewing out of the so-called Holy Realm Devil's Cave. Hanfei could even see a dense, aurora-like glow. Hanfei immediately frowned and said, "Old Yuan, it seems that there's something wrong with our previous judgment. The real place that absorbs energy should be the array eye of the Forbidden Island. And this array eye is more likely to be used to expel impurities. Look, what kind of strange things are these demon plants?" The old turtle said, "No matter how heterogeneous the energy is, it's still energy. Although this place seems to spit out energy, why is it the most this year? And, according to them, this is the 6th time?" Hanfei said, "This means that the Forbidden Island has eaten too much. They have eaten too much there, so they have to expel some impurities." The old turtle was speechless. "You're so disgusting." Hanfei was speechless. What's going on in this old turtle's head? Hanfei snorted. "What I want to say is, why did Zhao Xianglong put the dragon head here? If he wanted to punish the dragon head, he should have put the dragon head and the dragon tail on the Forbidden Island. What else can they do here except to be hit by the heterogeneous energy?" The old turtle said, "If you want to know the reason, you have to go down and have a look. Only then can you know." Huff, Hanfei thought for a moment. "Since I can come out from under the Forbidden Island, I can definitely come out from here. However, when I came out of the Forbidden Island, I met Zhao Xianglong. Zhao Xianglong was an old acquaintance and would take care of me. But after coming out from here, it might be different. I hope this trip will be worth it." Hanfei said, "At this moment, the energy is erupting. I can't go in with my strength. I have to wait until the energy tide stops. Old Yuan, I'm going to enter Forge the Universe first." Wait a minute. Suddenly, the old turtle's action made Hanfei puzzled. What did old Yuan find? The old turtle said, "I seem to feel the aura of an acquaintance." "Huh? An acquaintance?" Hanfei couldn't help but laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. What era are you from? It's the Age of Gods. You have an acquaintance? If your acquaintance is here, we will all be doomed." However, the old turtle shook his head and said, "No, it is also your acquaintance." "Huh?" This time, Hanfei couldn't laugh. "My acquaintance? And in this forest of horrors?" Even if he racked his brains, he couldn't think of who it was. At this moment, he saw a large area of red roots, which were intertwined like blood vessels, covering the sky. The surrounding temperature suddenly rose at this moment, and it didn't rise by 1 or 2 degrees, but by thousands of degrees. However, Hanfei had already forgotten about the temperature. When he saw the roots, Hanfei was shocked. "Are these the roots of the 10,000-year-old big red trunk?" He had dug up the 10,000-year-old big red trunk before. However, although these roots looked similar to the 10,000-year-old big red trunk, their quality was obviously much stronger. At this moment, he saw a young man in a black robe. The lower half of his robe was a root, and the upper half was a human. At this moment, he was standing on a large root. "Blood King." Many venerables respectfully saluted the young man. As Hanfei expected, this should be the fake king of the Forest of Horrors. The young man nodded slightly and said with a chuckle, "Everyone, the energy tide of the holy altar is getting more and more frequent. It seems that my efforts have finally paid off. My efforts have finally shaken the cage. And now, I confirm that the passage connecting the cage to the outside world may be opened within 100 years, or even earlier." Wow! Around the eye of the array, many venerables exclaimed. What? The energy tide was stirred up by the Blood King? At this moment, this was the only voice that could be heard in the presence of the fake king. However, Hanfei could clearly see that on his side, Snake Man and the others didn't seem to believe it. The Blood King didn't seem to take it seriously. He pretended to be relaxed and said, "Today, I can send some venerables out of the cage first. Of course, it is also necessary to bear the danger of the void passage. Does anyone want to come?" Second update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 16:05. When this Blood King said that he was the one who stirred up the energy tide, Han Fei didn't believe him. This guy even lied to his own people. Was it just to strengthen his dominance? But then he heard something else. This Blood King can send people out? Are you King kidding me? In the outside world, there were only the yin-yang sky and the waterwood sky. There had never been any powerful demonic plants in the yin-yang sky. In the waterwood sky, the three major forces were very unique. How could they accommodate these demonic plants? Han Fei couldn't help but wonder if this Blood King really had the ability to send people out. Why didn't he go out himself? Judging from the reactions of the other demonic plants here, they obviously didn't believe this guy. Demonic plants that could cultivate to the venerable level were not fools. Someone said, "Lord Blood King, since the passage can be opened in 100 years, we're not in a hurry. When the passage opens, we can go together. Wouldn't that be much more convenient?" Someone echoed, "Yes. Anyway, we have a long lifespan. It's just 100 years. It doesn't matter." Immediately, a few powerful demonic plants began to echo. Han Fei was stunned. This was the most useless false king he had ever seen. "You're already a false king. Why don't you show some king aura?" The young man seemed to be used to this scene. He smiled faintly. "I won't force you. You can also wait for 100 years." The strong movement of the holy altar and the devil's cave indicates that a great horror is coming. "Today, I'm just here to tell you that if no one goes out, I'll go out myself." Huh? Many people were shocked. The Blood King was going to leave the cage? Today? Immediately, Serpent Man, Dragon Octopus Tree, and the others all moved. A false king expert was going to break out of the cage today. This was definitely not a trivial matter. Those who had just voiced their doubts were also dumbfounded. Could he really leave? He heard the Blood King say, "This king came here today to invite all of you to witness the eruption of the cage holy altar. Let's see how I break out of the void and leave the cage." The Blood King's voice, accompanied by the scouring of the energy tide, sounded particularly intimidating. Immediately, Han Fei saw a withered vine with many tiny snakes coiled around it. It said leisurely, "Since Lord Blood King is leaving, we will naturally attend the ceremony." For a moment, this energy tide didn't seem so fragrant anymore. Compared to swallowing energy, breaking free of the cage was more likely to affect their hearts. Han Fei felt that if it were him, he would rather fight with the Demon Beast Alliance every day if he had a chance to leave. This was especially true for those super experts who had reached the half-king realm. It was impossible to become a king in the cage, but might be possible outside the cage. In reality, if they really went to the Waterwood Sky, as long as the three great monarchs didn't interfere, they might really be able to transcend their tribulations and become monarchs. Therefore, many people immediately followed the Blood King to watch the ceremony the moment they arrived. Smack! On the back of the Dragon Octopus Tree, the purple-haired girl said, "Dragon Octopus, follow him. I want to see how he's going to break out of this cage." All right. Han Fei glanced at the holy altar's Devil's Denver. Although his goal was the Devil's Den, he had already found the Devil's Den, and the energy tide was still erupting. He couldn't go in now. He might as well follow him and take a look. The Blood King was obviously lying, but he was about to get out of the cage himself. Even Han Fei began to feel puzzled. The reason why the Forest of Horrors was called the Forest of Horrors was that the demonic plants here were too big. There were 7 or 8 of them as big as the Dragon Octopus Tree. They didn't even hide their bodies. Some of the demonic plants were still disguised. After traveling for about 1,000,000 miles, the Venerables came to a place burned by flames. This was a kind of sea fire that looked like blood and covered a radius of 100,000 miles. On this land, Han Fei was surprised to find the big red trunk. His first thought was that this Blood King was a big red trunk that had become a spirit. This explained why he was so hot. Only a strange creature like the big red trunk would burn at the bottom of the sea all day long. When talking about the big red trunk, Han Fei couldn't help but think of the Blood Sea Divine with City of the Waterwood Sky. If this Blood King was the big red trunk, then what was his relationship with the Blood Sea Divine with City? The old turtle suddenly said, "Yes, this familiar aura is the aura of the evil king." Han Fei was shocked. "You mean The mysterious king of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City? The old turtle said, probably. I'm a dignified king. How can I not know such a trivial thing? Although the evil king has never shown up, you stayed outside the Blood Sea Divine Wood City for a long time. I'm used to this aura. Han Fei asked, you mean the Blood King is related to the Blood Sea Divine Wood City? He has been in contact with the one in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City? Han Fei was shocked. If the two were related, then if the Blood Sea Divine Wood City could gather so many venerable supermasters at once, its strength would probably jump to become the strongest in the Waterwood sky. If all the demonic plants in the Forest of Horrors went there, this force would be enough to sweep the Waterwood sky. The Cloud Sea Divine Tree and the White Shell Royal City together will be no match for the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. At this time, a group of people had entered the Blood King's territory. Although they didn't like fire, they were all venerable supermasters after all, so it was not a big deal for them to endure it for a while. However, there were still some complaints. For example, the purple-haired girl on the back of the dragon octopus tree said bluntly, I hate fire. It makes me want to fight. The withered vine said, Zilluo, bear with it. After all, the Blood King is going to break out of the cage. This is a big deal. Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. Looking at the woman with a disdainful smile, he remembered that this was the woman that Yu Tian'ai wanted to see. The venerables ran, and in a moment, they came to the center of the big red trunk forest. They saw that there were hundreds of cracks in the void here. Those cracks ranged from dozens of feet in size to hundreds of feet in size, and their thickness was uncertain. In these cracks, slippery vines of different thicknesses stretched out from them and pierced into the sea. Due to the sheer number of these slippery vines, they pierced through everything within a radius of dozens of kilometers. Han Fei had never seen such vines before. They didn't look like the vines of the big red trunk, so it was possible that they were the Blood King's main body. The Blood King stood in midair and looked at the cracks. Due to the energy tide of the Holy Altar's Demon's Den, this king has forcefully opened up a void and has already made contact with the outside world. You might not believe it, but this king can let you take a look at the outside world. Upon hearing the Blood King's words, someone immediately said, Lord Blood King, what does the outside world look like? Lord Blood King, please show us. Lord Blood King, don't hide it. Han Fei also looked curiously at the Blood King. He saw countless vines suddenly extend out from his lower body and pierce into the ground. Following that, the slippery vines that burrowed into the void began to expand. Among the cracks that filled the sky, a rift that was more than 300 feet in length was forcefully opened up. Ka-ka-ka, sounds could be heard continuously, like glass cracking. However, everyone could see that there was a strange energy rapidly repairing the cage from the cracks. Energy surged from the Blood King's body, and the terrifying power caused the tide that had just swept over to gather directly at the Blood King. The crack was getting bigger and bigger. Suddenly, everyone saw that on the other side of the crack, there was a relatively blurry water where red fish were swimming. Puff, a tentacle reached out and pierced a big fish in an instant. As the slippery tentacle quickly retracted, the cage quickly closed. Squeak, with a cry, Han Fei saw a millennium snapper that had been caught and appeared here. Only then did Han Fei realize that there were no millennium snappers in the big red trunk here. Han Fei felt that something was wrong. The dragon octopus tree and even Zilluo seemed to be shocked. Serpent Man exclaimed, This creature is only in the sea demon realm. The outside environment can allow such a weak creature to survive. It seems that the outside world is much safer than the cage. The people of Sea Bamboo couldn't help but say, Lord Blood King, can you watch a little longer? We can't see what the outside world looks like. Someone echoed, Yes. Lord Blood King, haven't some people been sent to the outside world by you before? Why don't you let them speak and describe the outside world? The Blood King said angrily, Do you really think I'm a god? You've seen how difficult it is to open this channel. Besides, because of the chaos in the void, the place I open is not fixed, so I can't find someone to talk to you. Today, I'm going to go out by myself. I can forcibly open the channel in a short time at the cost of 30% of my cultivation. but it won't take more than 2 minutes. Whether you go or not, it's up to you. That's all I have to say. What's your choice?" When the Blood King said this, Han Fei and the old turtle said at the same time, no. He had to admit that the two of them were quite in sync. Han Fei sneered in his heart. "You think you're so great. Outside is the Blood Sea Divine Wood City, which is guarded by a king. If you go there, you'll either be enslaved or die. Even if the Blood King goes there himself, it won't be easy." The old turtle said, "No, the Blood King must have gone there long ago. Otherwise, where do you think those big red trunks came from? He's just luring these demon plants." Han Fei said in surprise, "That's true, but what's his purpose in luring these demon plants? Does he need to recruit a large number of demon plant powerhouses for the Blood Sea Divine Wood City?" The old turtle said leisurely, "What if this Blood King and the King of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City are the same person?" Han Fei, Part 3. Asking for votes. Moi. End of this chapter. Chapter 1606. Han Fei was stunned by the old turtle's idea. He was dumbfounded for a long time. Shoot. Han Fei couldn't help but feel horrified. It was not impossible. Well, maybe the possibility was very high. This was the only person he had ever seen who could use his own strength to open the cage formation. A false king. However, did the false king have the ability to open the cage of the heaven and earth natural array? It was obviously impossible. If he could, the false kings of the Demon Beast Alliance, Black Blood City, and the Immortal City were not weak either. It was said that the king of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City had never left the city. However, he once fought the Life Queen and the White Armor Emperor alone. Therefore, the Blood Sea Divine Wood City had a considerable status in the Waterwood Heaven and became one of the three major forces. However, who said that a person who could fight two kings must be a king? Creatures like demonic plants were usually very powerful in their own territory. If the Blood King was the mysterious king of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City, why did he want to trap these demonic plants? These people could all become his hired thugs. The old turtle said, "Don't you think it through? But if you think about it from another perspective, what if the one in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City is his reincarnation?" Han Fei was horrified again. This means that the guy in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City is actually not a false king, but a half-king. He hasn't passed the king tribulation yet. Then, if he really calls these demonic plants over, they may not be able to suppress them. So, the Blood King's real purpose is not to take them out, but to kill them. The old turtle said, or to swallow them, or to enslave them. But in any case, this evil king should be ready to pass the tribulation. Han Fei wondered, "Why do you think so?" The old turtle said, "If the one in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City is really the reincarnation of this Blood King, then why did he call the Blood King over now? After all, the reincarnation and the original body are two different people, and they haven't completely merged yet." Han Fei thought for a moment. However, these two are equivalent to the same person. Then, can this Blood King block the lightning tribulation when he passes the king tribulation? The old turtle said, "Theoretically, he can, as long as their origins are the same. However, to ensure that nothing goes wrong, combining the two in the end might be more reliable. I still don't think it's necessary for him to kill other demonic plants, unless doing so can help him transcend the tribulation." Old tortoise, you'll have to wait until you can really sneak in a Blood Sea Divine Wood City. Right now, no one knows what's going on the other side. After all, if these demonic plants really chose to go over, they would definitely die. However, these demon plants are all sea demon plants. They're close to sea demons and don't get along with you humans. It doesn't matter if they die or not. But we can't let the Blood King transcend the tribulation successfully, just in case our guess is right. This fellow was able to challenge two monarchs at the half-martial monarch realm without being defeated. What would happen if he became a king? At this moment, no matter what, Han Fei couldn't let the Blood King successfully lure so many people away. Not even the Blood King could leave. He had promised the Life Queen that he would help her wipe out the Blood Sea Divine Wood City and the White Shell Kingdom in the future. If the Blood King could even challenge emperors, At that time, he would have to go to the sky and kill this guy. Han Fei sighed. Old Yuan, do me a favor and destroy this exit. The old tortoise was speechless. My soul quality is just a little bit better. You want me to destroy this exit in front of so many people? Isn't that courting death? Since he couldn't stop it, he could only make trouble. On the dragon octopus tree, a speck of dust flew away. What do they say next? It didn't matter anymore. The Blood King's purpose was to fool those people. And these people didn't seem to trust the Blood King so much. This could be taken advantage of. The energy tide was still erupting. Every time it erupted, it was like a shock wave sweeping across the entire forest of horrors. In this turbulence, it was very easy for Han Fei to escape without worrying about being discovered. 20,000 kilometers away, a half-martial monarch realm cultivator could still clearly perceive such a short distance. Even a peak-level venerable could feel the eruption here. Han Fei directly threw out a large number of ultra-quality demonic stones and detonated them. Rumble, just when many people were tempted by the Blood King's words, they heard a violent roar tens of thousands of kilometers away, instantly attracting most people's attention. The Blood King was stunned and looked directly at the place 20,000 kilometers away. However, dozens of demonic trees were blown to smithereens. Ziluo, Sea Bamboo, and the others all changed their expressions, because in the range of the explosion, there was even seawater gathered into words. Honor were the words, "The Blood King lied to you and intended to kill you." Han Fei's operation was so simple and violent. Originally, many people had doubts about the Blood King. Now, someone had pointed out this layer of window paper. Who could easily risk their lives to accompany the Blood King to the outside world? Who is slandering me? The Blood King's speed was so fast that Han Fei didn't dare to imagine it. In less than a second, a vine directly drilled out of the ground and appeared at the site of the explosion. At the moment of the explosion, Han Fei had already fled 3,000 kilometers away with the waves. Han Fei could stick to the bottom of the sea and turn into a speck of dust, not afraid of being discovered. Unless this Blood King swept every grass, every tree, and every speck of dust within 10,000 kilometers. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to find Han Fei. This was the power of the Gemini divine technique. Immediately after the Blood King, 3 people appeared at the site of the explosion. Ziluo said leisurely, "Lord Blood King, what do you want to say?" The Blood King glanced at Ziluo coldly. "Why, are you doubting me?" Ziluo smiled lightly and looked at the other 2. "I dare not. But what do Qianlong and Sea Bamboo think?" Sea Bamboo smiled slightly. "Lord Blood King, why don't you let the venerables who went out come and have a chat with us? Otherwise, I think it's better to wait for the cage to break naturally." Qianlong said, "I think I can still live for tens of thousands of years. If I reincarnate, it shouldn't be a problem to live for another 50,000 years. It's just 100 years. I can wait." Then, a group of people quickly arrived. Although they didn't speak, they seemed to have their own thoughts. The Blood King snorted coldly. "He's just a junior. Do you think he can scare you just by making a little noise? It seems that I overestimated you after all. I didn't want you to continue to be trapped in the cage. Since you don't believe me, you can stay here." Under the gaze of a group of people, the Blood King still said proudly, "If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it a long time ago. Why would I wait until now? It's useless to say more. I'm leaving. If you want to continue watching the ceremony, you can come and watch." Seeing that his goal had been achieved, although Han Fei also wanted to follow and watch, the old turtle reminded him, "Don't move. The ground is completely covered with vines. He is looking for you." Han Fei remained in a state of dust, not daring to move at all. Only the old turtle could see the situation in the distance with his divine sense. After about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the old turtle said, "That guy has opened the void." However, the vine tentacles underground haven't completely left. He's still looking for you. After more than 10 minutes, the old turtle said, "He got in the void crack." However, those slippery vine tentacles are still stuffed in the space crack. There are also some remnants of vines underground. He He didn't really leave. He should have left a clone, which should be half a king. Han Fei wondered, is he gone? The old turtle said, the space he went through is closed, leaving only a crack of a few dozen feet. Obviously, most of his body has gone there. Han Fei wondered. At this time, he just went there? He didn't even take a few more breaths of the tide that erupted from the holy altar? The old turtle said, he still has a half-king clone. There are very few clones left, only in dozens of vines, probably to avoid suspicion. You can come out now. As the dust floated, Han Fei quietly leaned forward. When Han Fei was thousands of kilometers away from those people, he found that the temperature here began to drop rapidly. Many big red vines began to wither, and gradually turn into dust. Zi Luo and the others were also puzzled. She said, it seems that he really left. I didn't find any clones or anything like that left. Qianlong nodded. His roots have all been taken away. These trees have also withered. However, these void cracks are still there, and there are still roots inside. I'm not sure if he has completely gone out. The Sea Clan said, this guy has never done what a king should do. He has been thinking about getting through this cage every day. Someone laughed. It's good that he left. Anyway, I don't really trust him. In the past tens of thousands of years, he has sent more than 50 people out. In the end, I don't believe that there aren't any good friends out there who would try to help us open up the passageway. But none of these people appeared. Someone agreed. Yes, the Blood King is not trustworthy. However, we really have to pay attention to the problem of the holy altar and the devil's cave that he mentioned. This year, it was indeed abnormal. It erupted 6 times in a row. It's a good thing, but it feels strange. Chilla. All of a sudden, a vine appeared out of thin air. More and more vines appeared, and after a while, they formed a twisted face. It was the void vine that Han Fei saw. The void vine said, I feel that someone has broken into the forest of horrors. However, the spatial fluctuations are very small and extremely difficult to detect. Just now, I blocked that area immediately, but I couldn't find him. Sea Bamboo said, why did that person remind us? Maybe it's a mutant of the same race who just doesn't want to show up. Zi Luo said, it's unlikely to be the same race, but we still have to be careful. A lot of things have happened recently. The Demon Beast Alliance, Black Blood City, and the Immortal City have all participated in the war. Only the Forest of Horrors is safe. Anyway, the Blood King doesn't care about it, so it doesn't matter if he leaves or not. But we can't let out the news of his leaving. I suggest we block the Forest of Horrors. Qianlong. I agree. Sea Bamboo. I agree. First update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1607. Han Fei didn't care whether these people wanted to block the Forest of Horrors or not. Anyway, it didn't matter to him whether it was blocked or not. At this moment, although he had exposed a liar, Han Fei wasn't happy about it. In fact, the Blood King didn't really leave. His clone was still lurking here. Therefore, all of this was just a self-directed, self-acted scam. And now the scam was blown up, but the Blood King's purpose should not have been fully achieved. Otherwise, there was no need to leave a clone here. He could just go out and become a king. In fact, whether Han Fei came or not, the Blood King was going to do this. It was just that Han Fei just happened to arrive and ruin his plan. From the words of these venerables, Han Fei could clearly feel that they didn't like the Blood King at all. It didn't even matter whether this person existed or not. The Blood King had just left, so they didn't carefully search this area. After all, even the Blood King didn't find anything. What was there for them to find? This group of people hurriedly rushed back to the holy altar devil lair. Only the Void Vine was still wandering here for a long time. The vines came out from here and there. Who knew what he was doing? Half a day later, Han Fei also returned to the holy altar. In his heart, Han Fei cursed, Old Yuan, is there no effective way to deal with this Void Vine? Just kill it? This thing is too annoying. The old turtle said, this Void Vine is not strong enough. He is much weaker than you. If it weren't for so many demon plants here, you could kill him at any time. Han Fei was speechless. Nonsense. If it weren't for these demon plant venerables, I would have killed this guy long ago. 2 days later, the energy tide finally stopped erupting. Half of the demon plant venerables around the holy altar had dispersed. Those demi-king and peak-level venerable demon plants wouldn't stay in this place and wait for the energy tide to come again. Only a few demon plant venerables below the advanced venerable realm stayed here. As soon as the energy tide was withdrawn, Han Fei crawled into it. Unlike the other side, the energy here poured out. The power produced in an instant was terrifying. If it erupted, Han Fei wouldn't be able to rush over it all. Fortunately, the energy was no longer erupting, and Han Fei could find a way to get in. This St. Altar Devil Cave was a bottomless pit. Han Fei entered the endless darkness and let his body fall. After only half an hour, Han Fei felt a suction force. Is there also a suction force inside? At this moment, it was already dark in all directions, and even the old turtle couldn't find a way out. Han Fei seemed to have returned to the feeling of being trapped in the array core before. However, as soon as he entered this place, he felt that the energy here was too heterogeneous. The degree of heterogeneity was far greater than the energy on the other side. When all kinds of weird powers tried to drill into Han Fei's body, Han Fei naturally rejected them. He covered himself with a layer of formation and took out the 9-palace fate ruler. The ruler began to float, and soon it landed on the great inauspicious lot. When he saw this hexagram, Han Fei narrowed his eyes and said, "Old Yuan, it seems that the dragon head is much more powerful than the dragon tail." The old turtle asked, "Do we need to make any preparations?" Han Fei shook his head. No matter what I do now, my body will absorb energy. Even if I extract the chaotic energy, there will be a steady stream of energy pouring into my body. If this goes on, my body will explode. Great inauspicious, hee. As long as it's not a desperate situation, everything is fine. At this moment, Han Fei had already become one and turned into his true body. The indestructible golden body carried the flesh and blood on its back, controlling the nautical panorama to look for the array core. Sure enough, the nautical panorama had the same effect as the other Tai Chi eye. As if the instrument had malfunctioned, it began to spin crazily. According to the rotation ability, Han Fei controlled the puppet to walk in the opposite direction of himself, calculate the circumference, and then find the center point to find the array core. Since this trick worked on the other side, it was naturally applicable here. Sure enough, although the calculated distance was a little off, it only took Han Fei 2 days to find the location of the array core. And this time, what Han Fei saw was a white round eye of the array. On the bright white light, Han Fei saw an extremely weird-looking monster, but there was no dragon head. Han Fei looked at the thing that was more than 2,000 meters long and looked like a pile of rotten wood roots, full of confusion. Was the dragon head replaced? Wait, Han Fei compared it to the real dragon head and found that the shape of the huge rotten wood was somewhat similar to the dragon head. However, on this dragon head, there were too many long tentacles or vines that looked like withered tree vines. Besides, it also had 8 dragon horns, which seemed to be composed of a kind of weird red flower. Han Fei was silent for a moment. Old Yuan, is the dragon head we see parasitized by a demonic plant? The old turtle nodded. I'm not sure if it is parasitized. However, it seems that it has been filled with mixed energy and mutated. Han Fei wanted to go closer and see if the demon purification pod would show any signs. However, once he approached it, it meant the beginning of the battle. Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, let me try it first." Han Fei used the Gemini divine technique and descended directly in the form of a white mist. The moment Han Fei approached the white platform, a dragon's roar rang out. Tens of thousands of void thorns appeared. Han Fei's reaction was very fast. He stepped on the soul-driving array under his feet, and the 100 soul devouring roar burst out. The embroidery needle in his hand had already performed the heavenly god stab. Kacha! Bam! 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 The soul-driving array was broken too fast. Although many soul thorns around Han Fei were shattered by him, many still fell on him. The heavenly god stab brought Han Fei a little time to rebuild the soul-driving array. In a head-on confrontation, Han Fei didn't win any tricks, but he didn't suffer any losses either. But the next moment, this platform began to be covered with weird shadow vines. Han Fei kept flashing in the air in a short distance. The infinity water gathered around him and tangled with the large shadow vines. Oh, another dragon roar. This time, accompanied by the dragon's breath, the wind was poisonous. Han Fei protected himself with spiritual energy, but it was instantly corroded. Before he could fight back, a giant vine whipped him and slapped him away. The power of that blow almost broke Han Fei into halves. At the moment when he was in the air, countless void soul thorns instantly pierced him. However, not far away, Han Fei's indestructible golden body appeared, and the one that was pierced was just Han Fei's afterimage. The body of white mist had already merged with the Gemini fusion at that moment. Oh, Han Fei said, very strong, a half-king. With the Gemini divine technique, I'm no match for him alone. The old turtle said, the combat power of a half-king. This is not good news. At the very least, judging from the battle just now, the soul in this body might not be a newborn soul body, but a mutated soul body. Han Fei added, and this dragon head is already turned into a demonic plant. Does it mean that if I stay in this array for a long time, I will become a demonic plant? Poop! At this moment, Han Fei saw a lot of energy drilling towards the dragon head from all directions. That guy had just fought with Han Fei and was a little exhausted, but now it was swallowing energy. The old turtle said, it seems that you guessed wrong. In Han Fei's eyes, the blue soul fire was jumping. Yes, he guessed wrong. This dragon head could actively absorb energy from all directions. It seemed that other venerable demonic plants had come in and were swallowed by it. Han Fei couldn't help but say, I see. The array I under the Forbidden Island absorbs energy, and the place where the energy is the purest is. On the contrary, the array I here is emitting energy all the time. Just now, the reason why there was a suction force when we came in was because its tidal storm had just passed, which produced a retraction force. Usually, the energy release of this array I is relatively slow. So, when the energy is gathered to a certain extent, an energy tide will erupt. The old turtle nodded. Well, this dragon head must have swallowed more than one demonic plant venerable that had entered this place, causing it to mutate. Han Fei said, I'm afraid that their souls have also been fused. Just now, in addition to the dragon roar, there were other soul attacks. No, I have to try again. In the second experiment, Han Fei still used the Gemini divine technique. However, this time he attacked with his black mist body. After sneaking over, Han Fei suddenly launched a divine stab and 100-beast soul-devouring roar. This dragon head had never encountered an opponent like Han Fei. It was inexplicably attacked before it even found anyone. Puff! The divine stab directly pierced the dragon's soul. There was a dragon roar, but it was not the dragon head attacking Han Fei, but it was roaring in pain. And the effect of the 100-beast soul-devouring roar shouldn't be great, because the dragon head didn't pause for long because of the 100-beast soul-devouring roar, probably only less than half a second. Immediately afterward, a semi-arc-shaped divine light shield composed of soul power enveloped the entire platform. Not good, it's a great path domain. Trapped in this great path domain, it is the absolute master. In the blink of an eye, Han Fei saw that in the void, countless tentacles stretched out and clasped at him. Of course, Han Fei wouldn't let it get what it wanted. A storm of golden fist marks blasted out. The infinity water turned into a blade purgatory, intending to strangle this dragon head from the periphery. A large number of void cracks appeared, and those fist marks were eventually sucked into the space cracks and disappeared without a trace. Roar! Next, another new skill appeared. The rolling sound waves, the sound waves of different frequencies, directly stunned Han Fei. Once again, the Gemini fusion was activated. Han Fei stood on the periphery, looking at the dragon head quietly, the soul fire in his eyes jumping. Interesting, it did swallow more than one demonic plant venerable. Second, asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1608. Hanfei's 2 attempts ended in failure. It turned out that this dragon head had long been conscious and had actively swallowed multiple demonic plant venerables. In addition, it had swallowed too much chaotic power, resulting in an inexplicable mutation. Now, this dragon head could no longer be called a real dragon head, but a freak. Hanfei's heart sank. In this case, the possibility of getting ownerless souls from this dragon head was not high. Just when Hanfei was thinking that this trip might be a failure, the old turtle suddenly said, "Look, it's twisting." Huh? Hanfei looked at the platform and found that after the dragon head fought with him, the vines, sound waves, shadow thorns, dragon roars domains. These messy energies were still there and sweeping each other. Hanfei was stunned. "What's going on?" The old turtle said leisurely, "It seems this dragon head can't completely control these abilities. Or rather, the original owners of these abilities. Their consciousness hasn't been completely extinguished. So, this dragon head is just relying on its powerful soul power to forcibly suppress the will of these demonic plant venerables." Hearing the old turtle's words, Hanfei's eyes lit up. "So, I actually just need to keep interfering with this dragon head? When the dragon head can't hold it anymore, I'll retreat and let it kill each other." The old turtle nodded. "That's very possible. However, sneak attacks shouldn't be of much use. If you send a clone over alone, no matter in terms of strength, spiritual power, or means, it won't be enough to compete with the dragon head. You can't shake it, and it can devour energy from this void at any time. How long do you think you have to sneak attack it before you can make it confused?" The soul fire in Hanfei's eyes flickered, and he suddenly thought of a great misfortune. The old tortoise was right. If he sent a clone of the Gemini divine technique in, he could only burst out a powerful force in an instant and barely compete with this dragon head. Once that moment passed, he wouldn't be able to resist the dragon head's attack at all. However, Hanfei had even tried a desperate divination. Why would he be afraid of a great misfortune divination? Although there was no chaotic chi to change his luck now, Hanfei's strength was not what it used to be. Earlier, when Hanfei fought against a half-king in his strongest state, he could only hold on for 5 seconds at most before he was beaten up. But now, Hanfei's pure power had reached 9,000 waves, which had exceeded the upper limit of an advanced venerable. In fact, he wasn't weak even among peak venerable realm experts. Coupled with the power of the great Tao, in terms of strength in the half-monarch realm, even that strength-type half-monarch from the Black Blood Royal City, the Trinity of Strength, was no match for him. Hanfei couldn't go any further now. This battle must be fought. It didn't matter if they fought earlier or later. Hanfei rested for a day and then continued to attack with the Gemini divine technique. This time, the black and white mist bodies entered the platform at the same time. This time, Hanfei was immediately enveloped by a domain barrier. But Hanfei didn't panic at all. The Dragonhead's domain power could only find his body of black fog. In terms of combat, the Dragonhead's strength was limited. After all, it was impossible to break out of this cage. Therefore, the limit of its strength could not be much higher than his. At most, he would be in a little danger, but it wouldn't be a big deal. Sure enough, the Dragonhead used a barrier and Hanfei used the blade purgatory. The Dragonhead attacked the soul with a shadow stab, and Hanfei used the soul driving array. The Dragonhead roared, and Hanfei used the 100B soul devouring roar to fight back. Hanfei couldn't hear the power of the sound waves at all now that his 5 senses were blocked. But the void was compressed by the sound waves, so Hanfei had to fight back with the invincible fist seal. This was a competition of strength, and it was only a competition of the number of means. But in fact, Hanfei and the Dragonhead were equal in strength. After holding on for 10 seconds, Hanfei combined the two into one. At this moment, the soul fire in Hanfei's eyes flickered violently, and his aura surged. The Dragonhead slightly opened its mouth and began to swallow the energy in the array eye. Hanfei shouted, "There's a forbidden technique here. Suddenly, the dragon head's swallowing power stopped abruptly, and the soul fire in Han Fei's eyes flickered, and he rushed directly to the dragon head, hammering it with both fists. Boom, 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 in an instant, thousands of punches and tens of thousands of hammers. Han Fei had been waiting for this moment. He had been madly consuming the energy of the dragon head at the beginning. When this dragon head needed to swallow energy, he would have a hand-to-hand fight with it. Those Rot-Tam-like dragon whiskers lashed at him one after another. Although the huge force was no match for the strength triple connection, Han Fei estimated that it was at least 15,000 waves. However, at this moment, Han Fei had burst out with a terrifying force of 20,000 waves. Hiss, Kacha! The dragon whiskers were torn apart by Han Fei one after another. Wherever the fist light and fist shadows passed, the vines withered and the dragon blood splashed. After 100 seconds, there was no monster here. It had been completely torn into a bloody and bare dragon head by Han Fei. Before those strange vines, tentacles, and bighorns were all removed by Han Fei. Unlike the dragon head, Han Fei's infinity water would not be restricted by the forbidden technique. The infinity water had its own characteristics. After all, it was just a weapon. Therefore, the vines and flesh torn off by Han Fei were easily shredded into pieces. At the moment the forbidden technique ended, Han Fei took the initiative and attacked with the 100 Beast-Soul Devourer and the Heavenly God Spike. Wherever Snowmorn passed, frost spread. The soul fire in Han Fei's eyes flickered. He was as strong as this dragon head, and there was no sign of great danger. In that case, the only possibility of a great calamity was a battle between the divine souls. However, Han Fei knew that he had the demon purification pot. Therefore, in the battle of souls, he had no reason to lose. When the void lines clasped the dragon head, in an instant, several kinds of chaotic soul power impacted Han Fei's soul one after another. Han Fei's soul power was not weak. He quickly read the souls for a moment and found a pure and bloody soul of slaughter. This soul didn't have the memories of the dragon race, but it was full of darkness and devouring. At the moment when the souls collided, Han Fei could feel its coldness and killing intent. However, the old turtles said, as expected, the original dragon soul couldn't hold on. It was devoured by this new soul body. However, this new soul was too bloodthirsty and crazily devoured other demon plant venerables, which led to its madness and extremity. Han Fei waved the heavenly god spike crazily. Golden blood was flowing out of the meatball, which was the result of the collision of souls. I'm going to kill you. Just as Han Fei and the dragon head soul were fighting for control, suddenly, a cold message was sent to Han Fei. In the next moment, the void exploded and a storm was formed. Han Fei's indestructible golden body couldn't help but roar. It turned out that the soul of the dragon head had actually detonated the soul of an Exalt realm expert that it had devoured. In such a narrow space, self-detonating one's divine soul was definitely a move that would harm one's enemy by 1,000, but also oneself by 800. However, the dragon head didn't care. This was the first time that it had been attacked by someone, so it had to kill this person no matter what. Han Fei was wounded in one blow and lost more than 1,000 points of soul. Han Fei immediately knew that he couldn't go on like this. It wasn't easy for him to accumulate soul power. He couldn't fight this dragon head to the end. Apocalyptic divine technique. This time, Han Fei directly sacrificed his 1,000-year vitality to perform the apocalyptic divine technique. The 1,000-year vitality at this moment was completely different from the apocalyptic divine technique when Han Fei was still an explorer. At this moment, Han Fei's 1,000-year vitality was enough to repair the foundation damage of dozens of venerables and eliminate evil spirits. A pillar of light suddenly descended from nowhere. There was a burst of roars and slaps, and a large amount of dirty energy seemed to be burning, emerging from the dragon head. It was like a vampire basking in the sun and then turning into smoke. Roar! BM! BM! In this case, Han Fei grabbed a holy light and used it as a knife. Puff, puff, puff. Han Fei wanted to cut off the dragon head. Clang, after the violent collision, Han Fei was a little dumbfounded. Although this dragon head had mutated many times, it was once a king-level creature. In terms of the strength of its flesh and blood, it was not something that he could cut. The vines that grew in the later stage were still fine, but once they went deep and cut the dragon bones, Han Fei's full blow only cut some flesh and blood. Since he couldn't kill it, Han Fei could only control the soul of this dragon head. Now, this was the only way to go. After a few minutes, the apocalyptic divine technique disappeared, and Han Fei could clearly feel that the dragon head was powerless. At this moment, Han Fei continued to control the soul of the dragon head. It seemed to be going well. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, an unexpected situation occurred. Although it was seriously injured by the apocalyptic divine technique, it was a top-level soul born in a king-level body after all. At the moment when the apocalyptic divine technique disappeared, when Han Fei thought he could subdue it, the dragon's soul jumped and directly drilled into Han Fei's forehead from between the eyebrows of the dragon head, trying to possess him. F***CK. Han Fei felt that he couldn't move his body. This dragon soul was trying to control his body? At that moment, Han Fei wanted to use the Gemini divine technique, but his mind was not under his control at all. This dragon soul was trying to stop him from thinking. At that moment, Han Fei was horrified. If he was controlled, he would become someone else's puppet, an extremely powerful puppet. Poochie, Han Fei sneered, and from between Han Fei's eyebrows, a small green vine slowly stretched out. The green vine clasped, and the dragon roared incessantly. This dragon soul probably didn't expect that it would encounter such great danger when it tried to possess Han Fei. After the soul was clasped, the dragon head completely stopped fighting back. The other souls, without the control of the main soul, were in a mess, biting each other. The vines of the demon purification pot rolled up, and a wave of souls was set off on the entire platform. A large swath of blue soul fire scattered in the air. Han Fei saw with his own eyes that a small dragon-like soul was forcibly dragged into the demon purification pot and disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Han Fei knew that the dragon head couldn't escape. Wasn't this the moment that he gambled? The ominous sign must be that his soul was not strong enough. However, he had the demon purification pot, but what did it have? Originally, Han Fei was worried that he might not be able to get any ownerless souls. However, when Han Fei took a closer look, he found that the demon purification pot still left a large number of ownerless souls, large and small. Third, asking for votes. Into this chapter. Chapter 1609. The soul of the dragon head was directly extracted by the demon purification pot. Han Fei had expected this. As the saying went, fortune comes from risk. If he didn't take some risks, how could he become a king? For a lunatic who was born to be adventurous, Han Fei felt that he was much calmer in the face of danger now. At that time, the soul of the old turtle was also suppressed in the depths of his consciousness. However, the soul of the dragon head was sucked in by the demon purification pot. Not only was the soul absorbed, but the demon purification pot didn't stop moving and stretched out two small vines. As the vines rolled, Han Fei saw a total of 27. He didn't know if it was a soul or something else, but it was swallowed by the demon purification pot. The old turtle trembled a little at this moment. This is the great Tao of those demon plant venerables that haven't been completely absorbed and assimilated by the dragon's soul. Although the great Tao of these venerables can only be regarded as ordinary, but they were so ruthlessly deprived. The old turtle didn't continue, for fear of annoying the demon purification pot. At this moment, the soul fire in Han Fei's eyes was burning, and his soul was shaking, but he laughed. I don't care. Anyway, these are all deformed creatures, and have already died. If they're not eaten by my calabash, they will eventually be digested by the soul of the dragon head. Then, they might as well provide nutrients for my calabash. This battle came to an end because of the appearance of the demon purification pot. As early as when the dragon soul was about to possess Han Fei, it was already destined to die. Even the old turtle, a dignified emperor, was detained by the demon purification pot because of the possession. The soul of the dragon head was just a reborn wisp of the azure dragon soul. How could it compare to the old turtles? As for the rest, they were all messy, ownerless souls. Han Fei's skeleton body couldn't help but shake, as if he was smiling. The next moment, the soul fire between his eyebrows spread out to prevent these souls from dissipating in the eye of the array. After a full 6 hours of collection, when Han Fei completely collected these ownerless souls, he found that there were more ownerless souls than he had imagined. Although he had guessed that there would be more souls sealed in the dragon head than the dragon tail, Han Fei didn't expect there to be so many. At this moment, Han Fei checked the information repeatedly. His soul power increased from 61646 to 110,683 points. Close to 50,000 points of divine soul power was actually obtained by him so easily. Han Fei sighed. After all the ups and downs of his cultivation, his soul was finally back. Moreover, after his soul power broke through the 9,999-point barrier, it seemed to not be suppressed by the realm at all. Han Fei asked in a hurry, "Old Yuan, my soul power has exceeded the previous limit. It seems to have surpassed the level of a middle-level venerable." The old turtle said unhurriedly, "Realms are determined by people. In fact, as long as your body, spirit veins, bones, race, and bloodline were strong enough, you would naturally be stronger than others. Becoming a venerable king was a small matter, compared to those ancient times." Seeing that the old turtle didn't continue, Han Fei asked, "What's ancient?" The old turtle sighed. Primordial divine beasts and primordial beasts are innately powerful. From bloodline to spirit vein, it could be said that he was favored by the heavens. I admit that you are indeed very lucky and very powerful. However, in terms of level, they are at most similar to me. After all, your spirit veins were constructed by my Tao. Therefore, your limits will also be lower than others. You might think that you're strong enough and that your soul is strong, but that's only relative to people at your level. If you were at another level, you would know what the difference is. In Han Fei's eyes, the soul fire flickered. What kind of gap? The old tortoise pondered for a moment before saying, "For example, your Emperor Sparrow. Fighting 2 or 3 of you shouldn't be a problem." Hell, Han Fei was so shocked that his blood froze. What do you mean by the Emperor Sparrow can beat 2 or 3 of me at the same level? What do you take 2 or 3 of me for? However, Han Fei knew that the old turtle wouldn't lie to him about this. According to the old tortoise, his bloodline and spirit meridians were not high enough to cultivate as a human. As if afraid of hurting Han Fei's self-esteem, the old turtle also said, "However, I won't lie to you. With your potential, it's more than enough to become a king. In the king's realm, among the thousands of clans in the vast sea, you may be ranked among the thousands of people in the same realm." Han Fei was speechless. "How can I be ranked among the top 100? The old turtle said, "I said thousands, not the top 100. Han Fei was speechless. "So, I can't even be ranked in the top 100? Is that what you mean?" The old turtle said, "Don't think it's too little. This is what I calculated for you. The thousands of clans in the vast sea are not really only 10,000 clans. In fact, it is said that there are more than 8 million clans in this world. This is the result of classifying all the similar clans in the same category. Otherwise, there would be more. Can you count how many people there are in each clan? With your luck and aptitude, you could be ranked among the thousands of clans in the king's realm. I don't think it's enough. You know, the human race is just in the middle of the thousands of clans on the race ranking list." Han Fei. At this moment, Han Fei was speechless. "Can't we just have a normal conversation? More than 8 million clans?" Han Fei said, "Hey, do you mean that I'm already standing at the forefront of billions of living beings?" The old turtle said grumpily, "Don't be complacent too early. I only said that your strength in the king's realm might be ranked that high. However, it's only because you've had too many opportunities in the past. You're not just carrying your own destiny. Perhaps you're carrying the destiny of the entire yin-yang heaven, or even the waterwood heaven and the cage heaven. After the king's realm, once you become an emperor, maybe you will be ranked behind again. Han Fei immediately had an idea. Old Yuan, what is your ranking among the thousands of clans? The old turtle said leisurely, when you get in touch with the 10,000 clans, you will naturally know. Now, it's useless to say more. I said this because I don't want you to be too proud. I said you are short-sighted, but you still don't admit it. When you get in touch with the wider world, you will naturally know everything. Han Fei slightly retracted his soul. The old turtle's words put a lot of pressure on him. But now he couldn't care so much. He didn't even know which thousands of clans he was. He only knew that the thousands of clans were called. Han Fei felt that he'd better find a way to continue to improve himself first. If he couldn't even become a king, then what were the thousands of clans? After chatting with the old turtle for a while, Han Fei collected his thoughts and set up layers of large arrays around him. In order to avoid the problem of too much heterogeneous energy here, Han Fei set up most of these arrays, followed by the arrays for energy absorption and spiritual energy absorption. Even though he had done so many arrays, Han Fei didn't want to directly make a breakthrough in this array core. After all, Han Fei was worried that the heterogeneous energy would destroy his potential. Forge the universe. Breakthrough, those ultra-quality demonic stones, spiritual spring water, and various kinds of energy all swept towards Han Fei. Previously, when he was hunting the sea demon Venerable, he did grab some good things. However, as his strength increased rapidly, Han Fei found that his reserves were no longer enough. Back then, he got 100 billion ultra-quality demonic stones from the Empyrean waterfall, but now he had less than 1/5 left. The spiritual spring water and the like were basically exhausted. According to this trend, whether he could cultivate to the peak level of an advanced venerable was a problem. Crack, because of the king's tribulation, Han Fei had already squeezed himself to the limit in the intermediate venerable realm. As soon as he broke through the advanced venerable realm, Han Fei's mass of flesh and blood shook crazily. The endless energy accumulated in the flesh ball, the body. In an instant, it surged to every corner of the flesh and blood, trying its best to fuse into his body, refining his body to the strongest state spontaneously. It took a full 3 hours for Han Fei's body to finally stop feeling swollen. And at this moment, Han Fei's breakthrough was finally completed. In Han Fei's eyes, information emerged. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 87, advanced venerable. Chaotic energy, none. Spiritual power, 114371. Perception range greater than 42,000 kilometers. Power greater than 9,806 waves. First spiritual heritage, unknown. Second spiritual heritage, unknown. First spiritual beast, twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish, level 75. Second spiritual beast, king sparrow, level 59. Main art, void fishing, level 6. Sky stealing technique, venerable level, divine quality. Good. Han Fei swallowed. He had finally reached the advanced venerable realm. His spiritual power had also increased by more than 3,000 waves, but it was just a natural growth brought about by the breakthrough of the realm. His strength had increased by 806 waves. Han Fei knew that this was because too much power had been squeezed into his body. Therefore, his strength had skyrocketed. Generally speaking, the maximum power of a peak-level venerable was about 10,000 waves. And a half-king realm powerhouse must be at least 10,000 waves. This was the reason why the venerable realm was a whole new level. If an explorer were to be compared to a venerable one, there was no comparison at all. In the eyes of a venerable realm powerhouse, an explorer was no different from a kid. There were even many venerable realm powerhouses who regarded those below the venerable realm as ants. Naturally, kings also thought the same of venerable realm powerhouses. This was also a normal chain of contempt that seemed to exist everywhere. After the successful breakthrough, Han Fei's body began to slowly disperse. In the end, his flesh and blood covered Han Fei's indestructible golden body. Han Fei immediately felt that his 5 senses had returned. It felt really good to be able to see and hear. Crack, puff. However, as soon as the flesh and blood covered his body, Han Fei only made a few casual movements, and a crack appeared on his flesh and blood. Some of his flesh and blood were torn, but he still couldn't hold it. The old turtle reminded him, although you have made a breakthrough, your bones are also growing. So, you still have to continue to cultivate your body. Chapter 16:10. Han Fei really didn't know what level his indestructible golden body was at now. Since he had experienced the heavenly tribulation, his indestructible golden body had a problem. Han Fei cursed. It's all that old B** starred Ren Tianfei's fault. What the hell did he create? I've finally mastered the indestructible golden body, but now there's a problem with my flesh and blood. Of course, the root cause of the problem was not Ren Tianfei, but the heavenly tribulation. Han Fei couldn't help saying, "Old Yuan, I've passed the heavenly tribulation. Shouldn't my body have also passed the heavenly tribulation? Why is my indestructible golden body so much stronger, but my flesh and blood don't seem to be stronger?" The old turtle said helplessly, "What do you mean your flesh and blood don't become stronger? In the past, your bones were stronger than your flesh and blood. Now, it's just that the heavenly tribulation has aggravated your problem. Do you remember that after the third lightning tribulation, you had to use the apocalyptic divine technique to recall your flesh and blood? However, your indestructible golden body has completely survived the heavenly tribulation from beginning to end. Do you think the lightning tribulation has transformed your bones more, or your flesh and blood more?" Han Fei. Alas, Han Fei sighed leisurely. He thought that when he broke through to the advanced venerable realm, his state should be able to recover to its strongest state again. But now, obviously, he still couldn't. Although this body could be reattached to the bones, there were more and more cracks. Clearly, it still couldn't bear the heavenly tribulation. In the past, when Han Fei practiced the indestructible tyrant body, he integrated the power of his soul into his bones. However, from now on, Han Fei made up his mind. If he had any ownerless souls, he would definitely stuff them into his flesh and blood. He wouldn't stop until his flesh and blood reached the same level as his bones. In Forge the Universe. A month later, Han Fei managed to maintain his current state. Although his flesh and blood were full of cracks, like a porcelain doll full of cracks, a slight touch of the finger would shatter it. However, this was already Han Fei's best state. Though Han Fei was practicing the dragon swallowing technique and was sucking a dragon bone. At the same time, his recovered body was absorbing the energy in Forge the Universe to cleanse and reform his body. His body automatically absorbed energy, which was the power of the Great Desolate Body skill. The Great Desolate Physique skill was an ancient skill from the Desolate era. It followed the path of merging the acupoints into one. Moreover, it was different from the only major acupoint of the Desolate God body. The Great Desolate Body skill turned the entire body into a huge acupoint. It was like a leakless body. Energy could enter but not exit, unless the owner wanted it to. Han Fei practiced two techniques at the same time in order to strengthen his body. Han Fei had discovered the benefits of the dragon swallowing technique. With his spiritual energy decomposition speed, he could absorb about 5 or even 6 strands of chaotic energy in a year with the concentration of energy in Forge the Universe. However, with the help of the swallowing technique, it only took Han Fei half a month to absorb the first chaotic power from the dragon bones. This speed was 4 to 5 times faster than directly absorbing the chaotic aura from the spiritual energy. Overjoyed, Han Fei practiced the dragon swallowing technique crazily. However, because the dragon swallowing technique could swallow not only the chaotic aura but also dragon power, dragon aura, and dragon luck. Dragon power could strengthen the body, dragon aura could refine the body, and dragon luck. Han Fei didn't seem to feel it yet. In short, the benefits he could obtain from the Song Dragon were simply too great. It was because Han Fei had been practicing the dragon swallowing technique that he could stabilize his level so quickly. Otherwise, It would take a year or two for a regular venerable to stabilize his level after a breakthrough. Han Fei, on the other hand, stabilized his level in only 1 month. Even so, Han Fei said to the old turtle helplessly, "Old Yuan, I'm practicing the dragon slaying technique." The old turtle was lost for words. The dragon swallowing technique. Han Fei shook his head. "I don't even know if there are any dragons in this world. I don't know what I can do in the future, whether I slay or swallow dragons. Forget it. I have to practice it for my recovery." 1 year passed. Han Fei could now absorb a dragon bone for 3 days. During this year, Han Fei accumulated 42 strands of chaotic energy. This speed was unimaginable to Han Fei before. Because the speed of absorbing chaotic energy had become faster, Han Fei's mind began to work again. After all, the time chain of Forge the Universe could continue to grow. Next time, the price Han Fei would have to pay was 1,000 strands of chaotic energy. If Han Fei's current speed didn't change, it would take about 24 years. But if Han Fei's speed continued to increase, maybe he could accumulate so much chaotic energy within 10 years. Could Han Fei accumulate that much? Of course he could. Back then, under the Forbidden Island, he dug out half a dragon. There were more than 1,000 dragon bones. That was more than 1,450 yuan. And that was when Han Fei randomly picked big bones and stuffed them into Forge the Universe. If he dug out the whole dragon, there would be at least 5,000 dragon bones. Besides, now he had a dragon tail, a dragon head, and a whole azure dragon skeleton. Adding up all these, he could be counted as a rich dragon bone. However, spending 10 or 20 years swallowing dragon bones and practicing his physique was a bit unbearable for Han Fei. Although in the eyes of the outside world, this should only be a year. But he really had to stay here for more than a decade. After spending 7 years under the Forbidden Island, Han Fei couldn't bear it anymore, let alone spending more than a decade here. Of course, although he wouldn't stay here for more than a decade, Han Fei didn't plan to go out in a short time. After all, the problem of his physique hadn't been completely solved. He hadn't mastered the great desolate body art, nor had he mastered the dragon swallowing technique, and his physical strength hadn't been perfectly attached to the indestructible golden body. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. At the beginning of the 4th year, Han Fei stopped that kind of repetitive cultivation. At this time, he mastered the great desolate body art. There was no telling if it was because of the success of the great desolate body art, but it took him 4 years to advance from level 87 to level 88 on his own. When the great desolate body art was mastered, Han Fei made a breakthrough. The success of the great desolate body art was mainly attributed to Han Fei's Forge the Universe, which had too much energy, dragon chi, natural spiritual energy, and demonic energy. Under the multiple absorption, it was only natural that the great desolate body art was a venerable level body art. After all, the great desolate body art and the indestructible tyrant body were 2 different types. The great desolate body art was relatively gentle, while the indestructible tyrant body was too domineering. The moment Han Fei mastered the great desolate body art, he subconsciously made a breakthrough, and then he stopped this numb cultivation. When Han Fei looked at his personal information again, he was a little stunned. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 88, advanced venerable, chaotic energy 345, spiritual power 115401, perception range greater than 43,000 kilometers, strength greater than 12,001 waves, first spiritual heritage, unknown, second spiritual heritage, unknown, first spiritual beast, twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish, level 76. Second spiritual beast, king sparrow, level 59. Main art, void fishing, level 6. Sky stealing technique, venerable level, divine quality. Hiss, Han Fei immediately shouted. Old Yuan, Old Yuan, I made a breakthrough. Do you see it? The old turtle said, I'm not dead. Of course I know. Han Fei exclaimed. You made a breakthrough in 4 years. Old Yuan, I'm cultivating on my own without any help. That's not slow, is it? The old turtle said unhurriedly, "Do you know how much spiritual energy and energy you've consumed? Half of the spiritual spring and ultra-quality demonic stones in your gourd world are gone. Based on your cultivation speed and consumption, all the resources you have here won't be enough for you to make a further progress." Han Fei looked at his spiritual spring and ultra-quality demonic stones, only to be shocked. He didn't expect that an advanced venerable would consume so many resources for cultivation. Han Fei immediately thought of Tang Yen. Other people might not know that there were 100 billion ultra-quality demonic stones under the Empyrean waterfall, but he knew it. However, he was unmoved at this moment. Han Fei basically understood Tang Yen. "I'm only a high-rank Exalt Realm expert, and I'm exhausting my cultivation resources at an extremely fast pace." How many resources would he need to consume when he became a peak-level venerable, or even a half-king? The old turtle said, "You should know now, to become a king, the accumulation of energy in the early stage is an astronomical figure. In the Battle of the Immortal City, hundreds of venerables and hundreds of thousands of explorers died. If they are counted as resources, it's enough for one or even two people to pass the tribulation and become kings." Han Fei licked the corner of his mouth and grinned. "Resources? It's not a big problem. There are many places where I can take them." Han Fei thought of the Zhang family. He was now an advanced venerable. If he snuck into the Zhang family again, who could find him? By then, he could loot the Zhang family's treasury. After the Zhang family, he could go to the Chu sect and then go from house to house. Han Fei smiled disdainfully. "Resources are not a problem. I'm very good at absorbing chaotic energy now. I'm going to continue cultivating until I run out of resources. By then, it's time for me to go out." Han Fei raised his hand and looked at the cracks on his body. The success of the great desolate body art had made his body much stronger. However, his bones were also getting stronger. However, the strength of the indestructible golden body should have reached a point where it was difficult to improve. There was still a lot of room for the growth of his flesh and blood. Therefore, at this moment, the cracks on Han Fei's body were not as thick as before. Previously, the flesh looked as if it had been glued onto his body. Now it looked like his whole body was cracked. Han Fei thought that as long as he swallowed dragon bones for another 2 years, hunted some venerables, got some ownerless souls, and fused them into his flesh and blood, when he reached the peak-level advanced venerable, he should be able to cultivate again. All of a sudden, the old turtle reminded him, "I know that you can continue to trade with the gourd. You can continue to modify the time here. But don't forget, the dragon bones are limited, and they're your fastest source of primordial chaos energy. Once they are exhausted, do you want to make up for them? That's not easy." Han Fei. Chapter 16:11. Hearing the old turtle's words, Han Fei actually wanted to say that he still had a whole dragon corpse. However, Han Fei, who had recognized the strength of the dragon race, felt that he was still too naive at the time when he made a deal with the Azure Dragon. When he had time, he would go and bargain with the Azure Dragon. That way, it wouldn't be a violation of the oath of the Way of Heaven. 2 years later, Han Fei had accumulated 709 wisps of chaotic chi. Although Han Fei wanted to stay for another 2 years, maybe he could accumulate more than 1,000 wisps of chaotic chi. However, except for all kinds of refining materials, the spiritual spring and ultra-quality demonic stones in Forge the Universe were all consumed. Originally, Forge the Universe was full of energy, but now more than half of it had been consumed. At the same time, this energy was also improving Han Fei's physique. When the resources were exhausted, Han Fei had to leave Forge the Universe. Almost 4 months had passed in the outside world. When Han Fei appeared in the outside world, he was shocked to find that the thousands of large arrays he had set up had been destroyed. Not much energy was left in this array core. Han Fei opened his mouth and a large amount of miscellaneous energy was sucked into his body. Immediately afterward, the energy flowed in his body. In a moment, 90% of it was spat out by Han Fei again. This was the unique ability of the great desolate body art, which could devour demonic spiritual energy savage, evil energy, and poison barriers and transform them into the power to nourish the body. It was said that those who mastered it would be invulnerable to all evils and poisons. However, this energy was too heterogeneous. Even the great desolate body art could only transform 10% of the energy. If it were someone else, they would become a monster after staying here for a long time. At this time, what Han Fei needed was not just a little bit of energy, but a lot of resources. Although cultivating in this array core could provide him with enough resource, energy, and spiritual energy. However, cultivation was not just about accumulating energy in the body. After strengthening his body, he still needed to go through actual combat. However, before he went out, Han Fei still needed to make some preparations. What if there were many demonic plant venerables waiting outside? What if there were more than one half-king realm powerhouse guarding outside? If he went out, he would definitely be in trouble. Therefore, after preparing some fish skin arrays for himself, Han Fei took out the 9-palace ruler of Providence and calculated his luck today. When the ruler fell on the tie, Han Fei was slightly relieved. After a while, when Han Fei activated the supreme yin-yang image and turned outside, he seemed to have touched the eye of the array. Looking at the energy surging at him from all directions, Han Fei was lost for words. Not good. I triggered the energy tide. It was different from the array core below the Forbidden Island. That array core absorbed energy, so they had to go in the opposite direction. Since this was the direction of the spitting energy, he had to follow it. When Han Fei turned the supreme yin-yang wheel, he couldn't directly turn himself out, but turned the infinite energy back from all directions. Only when the array core was filled with enough energy would it form an energy tide that would send him out. Fortunately, Han Fei had the great desolate body art. Otherwise, it would be hard to avoid a mutation if one were to be constantly exposed to this heterogeneous energy. During this process, energy and spirit chi were constantly replenished. The supreme yin-yang wheel spun for a full hour. Han Fei felt that if he continued to spin like this, he might be crippled. At this moment, the energy surging in the array core spurted out like a volcanic eruption. When Han Fei rushed out of the array core with the energy tide, he was already ready for battle. After all, it took him more than half an hour to get out, and those venerables should have all arrived. However, Han Fei was surprised to find that there was not a single person here. Were they? Didn't they say that there was a riot in the holy altar and the energy tide was constantly surging, and some demonic plant venerables had already lived here? But now, it was quiet here, and there was not even a ghost. Could it be that something had happened? Han Fei immediately took out the nautical panorama and activated it. The panorama rotated a few times and pointed in one direction. Where the Blood King is. Han Fei immediately used the Gemini divine technique, followed the energy tide, and quickly rushed to the place where the Blood King had been. Half a day later, Han Fei hadn't reached the place where the Blood King had left before. When he was still hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, he found that many demonic plants had withered and died. Another 50,000 kilometers in, the demonic plant venerable was fighting here. Rumble, crack, one after another, colossal creatures were fighting against an even larger colossal creature. There were many roots and vines growing on the body of the super behemoth, and the branches were as thick as dragons. They were wantonly in the ground and in the sea. When Han Fei saw this thing, he suddenly exclaimed, "Blood Sea Divine would branch?" Han Fei had seen this thing before. In the past, Yang Rian took a piece and refined it into a secret treasure, which killed several of her teammates. At this moment, the Blood Sea Divine would branch Han Fei saw was hundreds of millions of times larger than the one used by Yang Rian. The old turtle said, "This is from the outside world. It's the king's domain Blood Sea Divine wood. He is absorbing the power of the entire Forest of Terror." Absorbing the power of the Forest of Terror? Does he want to destroy the Forest of Terror? The old turtle sighed. I don't know. However, I'm sure that this branch has king-level power. Although it's only a part of its roots, it's still a king-level power. This is not something that ordinary venerables and some explorers can resist. In the field, the seven-colored light twisted and the seven-colored sponge shouted, "No, it's growing too fast and can continuously obtain energy from the forest of terror, unless we cut off its absorption of energy." A big snake complained, "That's not going to work. We destroyed the forest of terror before, but this be asterisk starred still explored new places by himself to absorb energy." Sea Bamboo said, "This creature is at least a pseudo-king. Could it be the Blood King?" Someone was speechless. How can the Blood King do that? Besides, the Blood King doesn't need to devour the forest of terror. If he really wanted to, why didn't he devour it before? A weird giant fish with thorns all over its body cursed. Whether it has anything to do with him or not, this thing is from the outside world. It wants to devour the energy of the forest of terror. With such terrifying power, it's far stronger than all of us. The power of this demonic plant has already surpassed that of the Blood King. Z Luo asked, "The problem is, how do we deal with this thing now? It doesn't fight against us. It will only fight back when we kill it. We've tried many times these days. Even when we work together, it can still slowly devour the forest of terror. Unless we call back all the venerables on the front line. Otherwise, how can we resist this demonic plant?" Most people looked solemn. Someone murmured, "Are the demonic plants in the outside world so terrifying? I suspect that the Blood King has already been killed." Many people nodded. Although the Blood King is not weak, he's not good at fighting. Facing such a creature, it's almost impossible for him to survive. Someone felt lucky. "Luckily, I didn't go to the outside world with him a few months ago. Otherwise, I'm afraid we would have died by now." While these people were discussing, Han Fei also said solemnly, "Old Yuan, I'm afraid this matter has something to do with the fake king in the Blood Sea Divinewood City. Is he going to transcend the tribulation?" The old turtle nodded. "Obviously, although this forest of terror is not a good place. The power of the forest of terror in this territory of demonic plants is also very considerable. It's more than enough to help a person transcend the king tribulation." Han Fei snorted. It seems that he failed to lure it out last time. Now, he's taking the initiative to take revenge. However, you want to transcend the king tribulation? How can it be so easy? Ignoring the demonic plants that were fighting with the Blood Sea Divine Wood, Han Fei looked for the Blood King's clone following the direction of the navigator. Such a big mess here must be caused by the Blood King's clone. Han Fei didn't want the Blood Sea Divine Wood to break the cage now. With his current strength, he still couldn't resist the chaos of the cage. The Blood Sea Divine Wood drilled holes everywhere on the bottom of the sea. Han Fei quietly touched the ground in the black fog and crawled into one of the holes. Like the turbid dust, Han Fei drilled in and out of the holes. 1 hour later, Han Fei easily touched the center of the Blood Sea Divine Wood's roots. Immediately, Han Fei saw a half-human, half-plant young man standing among the roots. Under the young man's body, his roots were plunged into a green liquid. When he saw this, the old turtle immediately said, "Kill him. He's drinking the earth-vein spring water. That's a treasure comparable to the spring of life." "Wow," Han Fei exclaimed. "What did you say? That thing is comparable to the spring of life? How many F** king drops are there?" The old turtle shook his head. "Not like that. In terms of drops, it is certainly not comparable to the spring of life. However, in terms of weight, it's almost the same. At most, 100 caddies of earth-vein spring water is definitely comparable to a drop of the spring of life. Just here, I'm afraid it is tens of thousands of years of vitality." Han Fei's heart trembled. F***CK. If I put it in the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm, wouldn't it be easy to revive the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm? Although the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm had always been in my hands. However, Han Fei could at most throw some energy and spiritual energy into it. However, the air of death there was heavy and the vitality was delicate. With Han Fei's ability, he could only slowly revive them. However, if he had this earth-vein spring water, the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm would probably be revived immediately. Immediately, Han Fei quietly approached. He was determined to kill this Blood King's clone. Chapter 16:12. The Blood King's mood was very calm, but he was also extremely confident. For this tribulation, in order to become a king, and in order to become the strongest king of the Waterwood Heaven, he had prepared for this day for more than 30,000 years. The corners of his mouth curled up unconsciously. Although someone made trouble a few days ago and failed to lure them over, it didn't matter. However, it didn't matter. He couldn't wait any longer. He had suspected that there was something wrong with the cage a long time ago, which could be seen from the abnormal movements in the holy altar. Therefore, he had to take the opportunity to free himself. As for the others, they were just nutrients for him. Swish! Suddenly, the Blood King's divine soul shook. A spear light, without giving him any time to react, pierced through time and space and directly pierced him. The Blood King didn't even have the chance to be shocked or even open his eyes. Half of his body was pierced by the spear. And this was the effect of using the death substitution art at a critical moment. Otherwise, the power of that spear could directly blow him up. The next moment, he saw a sea demon in the shape of a shrimp soldier standing above the earth vein spring. As the shrimp soldier reached into the water, a large area of the earth vein spring disappeared without a trace. The moment Han Fei appeared, the Blood Sea Divine would moved. However, Han Fei didn't just stand there and do nothing. He also took action. The Blade Purgatory had been formed, and everything in all directions that could be made into a knife became a knife at this moment. Seeing that his sneak attack failed to kill the Blood King, Han Fei took the opportunity to chase after him. He threw out the Heavenly God Stab and the 100 Beast Soul devouring roar at the same time. As soon as the Blood King came back to his senses and glanced at Han Fei, blood spurted out of his 7 orifices and he was seriously injured. The Blood King's clone was shocked. Who was this person? The interval between these attacks was too short. Moreover, every blow was a top killing move. According to his strength, this person was at least a half-king powerhouse. However, there were only a few half-monarchs in Black Blood City. He could count them all, and there was no such person. The Blood King was shocked. Thousands of vines surrounded him, and a tree spear condensed in his hand. However, when the tree spear condensed halfway, the Blood King was shocked to find that the road here had been blocked. This kid actually possesses such a heaven-defying technique. In the blink of an eye, the Blood King pressed his hand onto the tree. Countless roots appeared out of thin air and protected him. Han Fei sneered. The Blood Sea Divine Wood is a super tree after all. Even if he was in the King realm, could it be that his roots couldn't be broken? Han Fei turned into a large cloud of white mist. In reality, there was also a body of black mist within the body of white mist. In an instant, a hole was bitten out of the divine Blood Sea Wood root. The Blood King said coldly, "You were the one who foiled my plans the last time. Who are you?" The Blood King exclaimed. In an instant, most of his body was devoured by Han Fei. At the last moment, Han Fei's soul voice echoed, "Guess. Should I tell you or not?" Blood King. The Blood King's clone was eaten up by Han Fei. Under such circumstances, he did not have the ability to continue to die for them. After Han Fei got close, he was shocked to find that if he was careless, he would have no chance to fight back after Han Fei used the Heavenly Gate technique. With Han Fei's current strength, if he launched a sneak attack, no one in the Half-King realm could defeat him. In fact, it was not that this Blood King was not strong. Even if it was just a clone, how could a strong master who could open the cage seal be ordinary? However, no matter how strong he was, he couldn't withstand Han Fei's sneak attack. Han Fei took a batch of earth vein spring water and waited. It weighed about 30,000 caddies. Han Fei's scalp went numb. "Old Yuan, did I get 30,000 years of vitality?" The old turtle said leisurely, "It should be. Your luck is really—" The old turtle was extremely depressed. He could understand why Han Fei could pick up such a big treasure. God knew. How long had the Blood King's clone been accumulating here? He had probably been accumulating since the Blood Sea Divine Wood burst out and grew here. With the power of the Blood Sea Divine Wood, he finally stole so much earth vein spring water from the Forest of Terror. but he gave it all to Han Fei. Of course, Han Fei knew how important 30,000 years of vitality was. Even if he could enhance his vitality and longevity by absorbing the power of vitality spiritual fruits, it was only himself. If he spent 60,000 or 70,000 vitality spiritual fruits, others might need hundreds of thousands or even 200,000. This was determined by their respective paths. Who asked him to embark on the Tianqi Great Path? However, after a while, Han Fei immediately said, "Old Yuan, don't tell me. This earth vein spring only has the effect of restoring vitality. It must have other uses, right?" In his knife array, Han Fei controlled the 10,000 knives to fight with the Blood-Sea Divine with branches while asking. The old turtle said yes. If there is another use for the earth vein spring, it is the luck of the earth vein. If it is scattered in a certain range of earth veins and refined, over time, new earth veins will be formed. At that moment, you would be able to obtain an endless supply of power in this world. You're not fighting alone, but relying on the earth vein. Speaking of this, Han Fei already understood. He sighed. So, the Blood King has been preparing for a long time. The reason why he could defeat two kings alone is that he borrowed the power of these earth veins under the Blood-Sea Divine Wood City. So, he has been stealing the earth vein spring of the Forest of Terror for a long time. The old turtle said, "I'm afraid so, because in the cage, the energy supply is too fast, and the power of the earth vein in the Forest of Terror also recovers very fast. So, he stole slowly, and it was difficult for others to find out anything." Han Fei felt that his blood was freezing. This man was too cunning. Han Fei felt that this person was as cunning as Old Han or Tang Yen. The Blood King was a king on both sides, but in fact, neither side was a real king. Bam, bam. Even if there were only some roots of the Blood-Sea Divine Wood, they were the roots of a king. In just a few seconds, Han Fei's blade purgatory was minced into pieces by those vines. However, at the last moment, Han Fei stepped on the ground and a teleportation array appeared. Immediately afterward, with a swish, Han Fei disappeared without a trace. At the moment when Han Fei disappeared, in the Blood-Sea Divine Wood City, a young man half lying on a branch of the Blood-Sea Divine Wood slightly opened his eyes. He sat up slightly, looked into the depths of the Blood-Sea Divine Wood City, and grinned. "Interesting. The doppelganger you left down there has been slaughtered. Although the Blood-Sea Divine Wood can continue to steal earth vein spring water, it can't fall into our hands. It's meaningless to continue to steal." Beside this young man, there was another young man, and they even looked exactly the same. The young man said solemnly, "My clone is at least at the Half-King realm. How could he kill my clone under the cover of the Blood-Sea Divine Wood? This person's strength is at least at the Half-King realm. In the entire Forest of Terror, there are no more than 3 people who can do this." The lazy young man, just now, smiled lightly. "Forget it. Anyway, I've taken a lot of earth vein spring water. Since the Blood-Sea Divine Wood has drilled through the cage, let's do another round and see how many people we can catch." The Blood King looked at the young man and frowned slightly. "Shui Fan, I haven't finished yet. None of the 3 people I mentioned had a chance to take action. Remember what I told you a few months ago? Someone is secretly opposing me. Now that I think about it, maybe it's not necessarily someone from the Forest of Terror." The young man called Shui Fan smiled disdainfully. "So what? Does he dare to come up? Now everything is ready, and the earth vein spring water is barely enough. I've swallowed a lot of souls, and you're back. Besides, I've parasitized the Blood-Sea Divine Wood, which has corroded his mind. Now I'm the strongest in the world. As long as I pass the King Tribulation, the White Shell Royal City, and the Cloud Sea Divine Tree. They'll all be mine." In Forge the Universe, the old turtle was speechless. Han Fei is really cunning. After entering the space of the calabash, he pretended to escape through the teleportation array. If it were a human being, they might wonder why Han Fei's teleportation array was activated so quickly. However, the Blood-Sea Divine Wood was a tree after all, and it didn't know much about human beings. Besides, it was only its roots that broke through the seal and not necessarily a lot of consciousness followed. If it realized it too early and was killed by someone, the Blood Sea Divine would suffer a great loss. In Forge the Universe, Han Fei's first sentence was, "Old Yuan, I found that the Blood Sea Divine can't find me." The old turtle said leisurely, "Don't jump to a conclusion so quickly. Obviously, these roots don't have much consciousness. Or, its consciousness isn't paying attention to you at all." Han Fei created a pit in Forge the Universe, which was specially used to hold the Earth Vein Spring. The nine-tailed mantis shrimp and the others all rushed over. Bam! Bam! Han Fei kicked them away one by one. "I'm warning you. If even one drop of the spring water is missing, I'll definitely peel off a layer of your skin." After teaching the nine-tailed mantis shrimp and the others a lesson, Han Fei rested for a day. Holding the nine-palace ruler of fortune as the ruler of fortune, he came to the ominous lot hexagram. Han Fei didn't take it seriously at that time. The word ominous only meant that it was slightly dangerous and not difficult for him. He had to go out and act according to circumstances. Chapter 16:13. Han Fei didn't know what the characteristics of the demonic plants in the king's territory were. For example, the Cloud Sea Divine Tree had a space like the Grand Illusionary Land, which could allow people living on it to enter and cultivate. Insert a perfect copy of the old version of the book Chasing Artifact. Source swapping artifact. This Blood Sea Divine Tree, as a king's territory, should have its own characteristics. However, at least for now, Han Fei hadn't found any special abilities. Even such a large root didn't find him. It didn't seem to be a king demonic plant. Swish, Han Fei appeared in the outside world again. Han Fei had made up his mind. Once the Blood Sea Divine Tree found him, he would rush out immediately. Even if he couldn't rush out, as long as he could hold on for a few seconds, he could create a teleportation array. However, when Han Fei appeared in the outside world, the old turtle said in surprise, "The branches of the Blood Sea Divine Tree are shrinking, and their coverage range is less than 30,000 kilometers. Huh? Han Fei said in surprise. "It doesn't even want the Earth Vein Spring water anymore." The old turtle scoffed. "Didn't you rob it?" Han Fei raised his eyebrows. "It's a king demonic plant. If it really wants to eat it, will it be robbed by me?" The old turtle scoffed. "You can't say that. Although this Blood Sea Divine Tree can directly absorb the Earth Vein, don't forget, it doesn't want these Earth Vein Spring water for its own cultivation. If this Earth Vein Spring really enters the body of a king, and it's even a king of the plant monster race, it will be refined immediately." Han Fei smiled coldly. "So it's a bargain for me. Now this guy is shrinking. Is it going to give up here? That's not a good thing." If the Blood King gave up the resources in the cage, it meant that the resources he could get were enough, and he could already pass the king's tribulation. Once the Blood King passed the tribulation, who knew how strong he would be? He would never allow such a thing to happen. After a while, Han Fei came to the edge of the roots of the Blood Sea Divine Tree. Han Fei saw an acquaintance, the man from the sea bamboo. This person didn't attack the Blood Sea Divine Tree. Every time the Blood Sea Divine Tree retreated a certain distance, he would advance a certain distance. The old turtle said, "In the forest of horrors, apart from the venerables that are fighting outside, all the other venerables should be here." After a while, those roots seemed to be pulled out, and the speed at which they were moving became faster and faster. In less than 6 hours, they were 10,000 li closer to the central region. Another 3 hours passed. When the Blood Sea Divine Wood roots could only cover a radius of 100 meters, the cracks in the void grew bigger and bigger. At this moment, all the monster plant venerables had gathered. Someone asked, "What's going on? Why isn't this thing expanding?" Someone sighed. "It's shrinking too fast. Could it be that he has given up on this place?" The void vine appeared and pointed at the crack in the void. "Look, I can feel that the void is being opened." Hiss. Hearing this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. "Does this mean the cage is being opened?" Haiju said, "Don't let your guard down." This root system was incomparably powerful. It first expanded its territory and absorbed the power of the earth veins. Now, it is tearing the void open. What's its purpose? Luo agreed. Yes, the power of this demonic plant has exceeded the so-called half-king realm. We can't defeat it even if we try our best. Even if we open the passage, whether we can get out safely, that's also a problem. A big half-king realm fish, covered with thorns and tree warts, said. As soon as the Blood King left, this thing came. Is there any connection between the two? At this moment, the Blood Sea Divine didn't take action, so the monster plant venerables didn't take action either. Han Fei turned into a speck of dust under everyone's noses and watched. Crack, crack, crack on the seal of the cage. The crack was getting bigger and bigger. When it was 1,000 feet long, suddenly, in the void opposite the crack, a face was reflected. For a moment, the old face of the Blood King appeared in front of everyone. He said, "Oh, so you're all here." Luo and the others were also a little stunned. The Blood King is not dead? Haiju said in surprise. Lord Blood King, what realm is this demonic plant in? The Blood King said lightly, the true king realm. Huh? This time, all the monster plant venerables who heard the Blood King's answer were dumbfounded. True king? There are still true kings in this world. The Blood King said, I'll make a long story short. The situation outside is dangerous. This sea area is 8 million miles long, and 3 kings exist side by side. They're the Cloud Sea Divine Tree, the White Shell Royal City, and the Blood Sea Divine Wood City, where I am now. We didn't completely leave the cage, but we're sealed in a larger area. I couldn't leave in the end, but I can become a king here. As he spoke, the Blood King's face disappeared, replaced by a strange creature that looked like a sea urchin. The big fish covered with thorns and tree warts said, 10,000 poison gall? You're still alive? The sea urchin said, Of course I'm still alive. I heard that you want to meet people from the outside world. I can only tell you that the environment here is much better than the cage. However, we still need to fight here. There are not many venerables in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City, and I usually fight outside. I came back this time just to meet you. The next moment, the Blood King's projection appeared, and he said, I don't care if you believe it or not, but I have to remind you that the Forest of Horrors has been invaded by someone, a super powerhouse who is at least at the half-monarch realm and can conceal himself. Do you think that the Divine Tree is absorbing the earth veins? Actually, it's not. While the Divine Tree is hunting that person, it is absorbing some of the power of the earth veins to open the cage. Unfortunately, that person still escaped. The Void Vine suddenly said, I've said it before. I felt that there was something wrong with the void fluctuations several times. However, I couldn't find the source of the problem. You all know that too. However, no one came to ask about it. Serpent Man and the others perked up. Based on the current situation, it was indeed possible to go to the outside world. However, the outside world might not be any better than the cage. After all, as plants, they miss their homeland a little. However, to the venerables, the outside world had a fatal attraction. They could become kings outside. When they were fighting the Blood Sea Divine Wood, they felt that this thing was too strong. There were so many of them, but they couldn't defeat it. Even if they cut off a part of it, it could regenerate immediately. No matter how much these people didn't believe in the Blood King in the past. However, when the 10,000 poison bladder appeared, some people were tempted. Maybe they also had to fight in the outside world, but it was better than the Forest of Horrors, right? In the Forest of Horrors, they also had to fight. And the most important thing was that they couldn't become kings here. Sea Bamboo said, Lord Blood King, if we go over, what about the others on the periphery of the Forest of Horrors? The Blood King said leisurely, I've already said, maybe in 100 years, this cage will definitely open. Even if it can't be opened by then, since I can open the channel now, I will definitely be able to open it in the future. You all think I study the cage all day, don't help you fight, and don't have a good relationship with you. So, you don't believe me. However, if I really want to trick you, I have the strength of a fake king after all. Do you think I'm really afraid of you? The Blood King was still fooling the demonic plant venerable. It seemed that he was going to succeed. Han Fei's heart sank. This B** starred is actually advancing by retreating. At this time, if I make trouble, it will have a negative effect. After all, These demonic plant venerables don't believe me? The old turtle said, "You can't make trouble now." At this moment, several senses are scanning the surrounding tens of thousands of kilometers. They are waiting for you to take action in the dark. Once you take action, your identity as an infiltrator will be confirmed. Han Fei's heart sank, and he continued to turn into dust, motionless. After a while, what Han Fei was worried about finally happened. At this time, more than half of the demonic plants chose to believe the Blood King. The big fish covered in tree warts was the first to choose to believe the Blood King. The girl Ziluo and the old man Sea Bamboo were probably born vigilant and felt that they could still wait for another 100 years. In fact, they also wanted the big fish to stay. After all, it was only a matter of 1,000 years. They were all half-king realms, and they had plenty of time in the future. However, at this moment, they were not very convincing. It seemed that the Blood King really had no reason to trap and kill them. For a time, a total of 36 demons followed the big fish with tree warts. With the help of the dust caused by their movements, Han Fei quietly attached himself to the big snake vine. The reason why he chose the big snake vine was that its strength was only at the advanced venerable realm. Under his strong attack, he could kill it with one blow. Besides, this big snake vine didn't have the ability to discover his existence. The Blood King said, "Ziluo, Sea Bamboo, I know you have concerns. Since you don't want to come, then inform Qianlong and the others. Send someone to pay attention to this place. After this, when the time is right, I will open this cage again. Poisonous dragon bile, you are a half-king, so when you come over, some void cracks will appear. You are not weak, so you can help others support the cracks and bring them over. 10,000 poison gallbladder, poisonous dragon bile." Han Fei's heart did a flip. Is this big fish actually a sea urchin? The Blood King's purpose was to use the 10,000 poison gallbladder to fool these people and make them believe that. He even left a sentence before leaving, so the others would naturally be much more relieved and let down their guard. Not only that, but he also encouraged the venerables on the border to go over. Han Fei thought to himself, this Blood King is really scheming. Not only is he good at scheming, but he is also very patient. It was his clone that was killed by Han Fei, but in the end he tricked 36 demonic plant venerables out of the cage. Han Fei thought for a moment. According to the 9-palace ruler of fortune, today was a bad day for him. Indeed, his luck was not very good. However, he still had to go over Chapter 16:14. The reason why Han Fei dared to go to the Blood Sea Divine Wood City at this time was that he trusted the 9-palace ruler of Providence. It wasn't like he hadn't experienced ominous divination before. When had it ever caused his death? Although he was also worried that the Blood Sea Divine would discover him. At least when he drilled into its roots and killed the Blood King's clone, the Blood Sea Divine Wood didn't react at all. Once one reached the exalted realm, even plants would be able to move as swiftly as lightning and the wind. These supremacies had previously suspected the Blood King because they suspected that the supremacies who had left in the past had not sent back any news, believing that they had perished. Moreover, without a half-king realm expert to lead the team, the venerable realm experts below the half-king realm wouldn't have the courage to go there. After all, the outside world seemed to be very dangerous. But now, with a half-monarch realm expert leading the way and supremacies who had previously gone out returning, most people were still willing to trust the Blood King. After all, who would want to be trapped in a cage? Seeing the poison dragon bile and the others enter the void crack, Haiju could not help but look at Ziluo. "Little Z, why don't you go? It seems that the outside world is quite tempting." The corners of Ziluo's mouth curled up. "I am still young. I can still live for a long time. Furthermore, I can still cultivate a reincarnation body. There's no rush." Just as the Blood King said, this cage has already reached the point where he can tear it apart. Then, it probably won't last long. "Hey, why aren't you coming along?" The bamboo branches on Sea Bamboo Man's body trembled. The Blood King is from the same generation as me. I've seen him fight a few times in my life. The last time I saw him was when he fought against a half-step king. Ziluo shook her head. "I haven't seen it. I heard that it happened more than 30,000 years ago. Haiju nodded slightly. I was there during that battle and saw it with my own eyes. Back then, the Blood King was still at the half-monarch realm. He only needed one strike to kill the wolf beast. That battle had established his position as the strongest. However, after that, he accumulated his strength for 1,000 years and attempted to break through to become a king. In the end, even though he failed, he didn't die. Ziluo nodded. I know. From then on, he didn't participate in the battle, and he wholeheartedly studied the cage seal. Now he's finally left. Haijurin nodded slightly. Not bad. This person is extremely patient. Once he decided to do something, there was an 80% chance that he would have complete confidence in it. I vaguely remember that when he underwent his tribulation, he was extremely conceited and went through 8 thunders in a row. Everyone thought that he would be the first Peerless Heaven's favorite in the cage to become a king. However, the final thunderbolt did not come. Ziluo said in shock. Didn't come? Haiju run. There aren't many people who know about this anymore. But it was precisely because of this that many demon plants understood that it was impossible to become a king in a cage. Therefore, no one disturbed the Blood King when he was studying the cage. Ziluo said in shock. Then now. Hiss, you mean he's going to cross the tribulation and become a king? Haiju Ren said unhurriedly. This is what I am confused about. If there were already kings in the outside world, would they really share the world with him? Furthermore, the appearance of the 10,000 poison gall was too hasty. The explanation was not thorough enough. I think there's something fishy about this. The other side, Han Fei attached himself to the serpent vine, and the 36 serpents crossed the void together. This void passageway was actually not short. Tens of millions of void cracks swept across, and all the venerables unleashed their full power. The power of the Great Path was almost exerted to the extreme, and they almost burned their vitality. In the end, when the power of these people was almost exhausted, the crack on the opposite side finally opened. The 36 serpents flew out at the same time and drilled out of the crack in an instant. Are you finally out? Are you finally out of the cage? Where is this? No, this is not the outside world we saw. Why are there so many immortal hero souls here? Damn it, what the hell is this place? Why is there no spiritual energy or energy at all? Oh no, the Blood King deceived us. Let's go back. However, when they looked back, there was no way out. Poisonous Dragon Ball suddenly shouted, Blood King, what do you mean? We are not familiar with each other, but you don't have to trick us. If there's anything, let's talk about it openly. There's no need to make a scene. A bunch of idiots. In the void, red leaves were falling, and a handsome man stood proudly in the void with a mocking expression. If you had followed me out immediately, maybe I would have chosen a few subordinates. However, you are too prejudiced against me. I don't feel at ease using you. I might as well use you all as resources for my tribulation. Swish, 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 crack, the void collapsed, and a large number of branches of the Bloodseed Divine would reach out from the void, grabbing those people. After experiencing the tearing of the endless void cracks just now, everyone's strength was greatly reduced at this moment. In an instant, 5 people were pierced. The 5 venerables tried to self-detonate and drip their blood to be reborn, using their stored power. But at that moment, the Blood King's lips moved slightly. Parasite. 5 clouds of blood mist enveloped the 5 people. Then, the bodies of the 5 people exploded. However, it was just an explosion, not a self-detonation. None of the 5 people succeeded in self-detonating. Poisonous Dragon Ball yelled in horror. Oh no, it's those void cracks. There's something wrong with those void cracks. Did you cause them? The Blood King smiled slightly. You only found out now? It's too late. The ability to parasitize is only the most basic ability of our demonic plant clan. However, the more basic it is, the less people want to study it. You don't know how to think at all, and don't pursue the true meaning behind simple things. TSK, but I do. So, I'll show you what parasitism is from the body to the soul. I'll let you know the horror of this. The Blood King laughed out loud. The temperature of the entire space began to rise rapidly. The sky began to burn, and red leaves were flying all over the sky. Even the poisonous dragon bile, a demi-king, was flushed at this moment. The Blood King laughed crazily. I'll show you that wherever there is temperature, there is parasitism. Temperature can breed everything. Han Fei wanted to sneak away from the big snake vine and let the dust fall to the sea. However, like the others, he was also parasitized. Han Fei felt that there was a strange vitality bursting out of the body of the black fog. A power was polluting his power and soul. Yes, it was pollution or the parasitism that the Blood King mentioned. However, maybe he was not targeting Han Fei, or maybe he had underestimated Han Fei. The moment that power invaded the body of the black fog, it was immediately gnawed by Little Black. Little Black and Little White's characteristics were that they could swallow anything. Therefore, the moment this strange power penetrated the body of the black fog, it was immediately swallowed by Han Fei. Huh? When all the venerables were affected and their bodies collapsed uncontrollably, the Blood King looked at the place where the big snake vine was. Swish, a whip shadow lashed out, and the void collapsed. Seeing that the Blood King was attacking it, the big snake vine immediately drilled into the void. Blood King, you really have bad intentions. BM, even a high-ranked supremacy shattered along with the void under the Blood King's whip. Before the serpent could drill into the void, a large number of roots chased after it and directly pulled out a divine soul from that piece of flesh. The Blood King chuckled. Everyone, now you can choose to submit to me or die. At the moment when the Blood King laughed out loud, the poisonous dragon bile erupted, and the tree lumps on its body burst open one by one. The dark green liquid drilled through the void. With a sizzling sound, wherever the venom flowed, the roots melted. The Blood King's parasitic ability seemed to have been broken. The Blood King didn't pay attention to the poisonous dragon bile, but said disdainfully, "Insignificant skill." The Blood King looked at the poisonous dragon bile, and a red light flashed in his eyes. With a bang, the poisonous dragon bile's head exploded. His body, flesh, and blood were broken, and a large number of red roots spurted out like blood. Immediately afterward, a void whip returned with a wisp of soul. Han Fei could even see the ferocious face and howl of the poisonous dragon bile. Under Han Fei's shocked gaze, the old turtle said, "These people are not dead. Their souls are still there. However, they have lost the ability to be reborn from a single drop of blood. Otherwise, in such a short time, heaven's cry would have fallen." Just as the old turtle spoke, a soul sound reverberated in the void, and the poisonous dragon bile shouted, "Blood King, you can corrode living souls, but don't you know that I can also corrode souls? Poison, offer my body, myriad poison mystique." BM at that moment, within 1,000 kilometers, the void was like a hole, and a large amount of poisonous fog of various colors suddenly seeped out. The Blood King snorted coldly. "You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Idiot, can't I parasitize your poison?" Immediately afterward, hundreds of millions of roots descended from the poisonous fog. As the roots withered, the poisonous fog was also rapidly dissipating. In less than 10 minutes, there were no more poisonous things here. Boom! Above the sky, the great Tao roared, and a rain of blood poured down. Obviously, among these venerables, the first one to die was also the strongest one among these demon plant venerables. A half-king was like a cripple in the hands of the Blood King. Only at this moment did these demon plants realize how powerful the Blood King was. Sure enough, a master who could be called a false king, even if he never attacked, they had no right to doubt him. Immediately, someone shouted, "Blood King, I'm willing to surrender." When one person surrendered, the others immediately scrambled to be the first. "King, I surrender. Lord Blood King, I've always admired you." The Blood King's handsome face revealed a trace of evil charm. Only Han Fei could see clearly that these people were also stupid. He said that they could surrender, but he didn't say that he would let them go. The souls of the few people before him have been extracted by this guy. Why don't you hurry up and resist? Are you waiting for him to parasitize your souls? Sure enough, the Blood King looked down at everyone and pondered for a few minutes. Suddenly, he grinned and said, then offer your divine souls. Immediately, a peak-level venerable erupted and shouted, Blood King, you scum, I'd rather die than surrender. Ha ha! The Blood King laughed like a lunatic, took a breath, and said, Die? Without my permission, do you think you can die? The Venerables. Chapter 16:15. Before this, Han Fei didn't know that a false king could be so powerful. Although Han Fei had never really confronted a fake king, he had been in contact with the Golden Boy and watched their battles. Han Fei was dumbfounded by his combat power. The Black Killer Snail King, Golden Boy, and even the one from the Demon Beast Alliance were nothing in front of this guy. However, Han Fei was very sure that this person, the Blood King who appeared here, was not a king. The old turtle couldn't help but say, this person is very talented and strong. Not only is he good at parasitism, but he also seems to have dabbled in the Tao of space. Han Fei thought to himself, this is the first false king I've ever seen who can fight 36 venerables at the same time. The half-king realm cultivators couldn't even take 2 moves from him before they were crushed to death. The old turtle said, don't overestimate this person. After all, he has planned to consume the combat power of these venerables to break through the void chasm of the cage. This person waited at ease for the exhausted to be exhausted and laid out an inescapable net in advance. That's why these people have nowhere to go to. Because of the delay, half of the venerables present were completely parasitized and had no power to resist at all. Those who could resist were whipped by the void roots and couldn't last more than a few rounds. Clatter, 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 the Blood King stretched out his hand, and a big black umbrella with golden light appeared in his hand. The big umbrella opened with a whoosh, and it turned out to have 3 layers. Each layer had 33 dragon bones, skeletons, for a total of 99 dragon bones. At the end of each dragon bone, a small bell hung. At this moment, these little bells were fully lit. Swoosh, 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 the big black umbrella began to spin, and the souls of the venerables enslaved by the Blood King were all sucked into the umbrella. Hula, the black umbrella closed. The Blood King grabbed the handle of the umbrella and carried it behind his back. He looked at the world proudly with a smile on his lips. The roots dragged the remains of the demonic plants whose souls had been taken away into the void. The Blood King smiled faintly. Although this king doesn't know who you are, you have some ability to easily sever this king's parasitic powers. I didn't expect you to come, but since you're here, I'm not an unreasonable person. I'll give you a choice. Hand over the earth vein spring water, and this king will allow you to be this king's #1 general. At that moment, Han Fei really wanted to slap this guy in the face. What the hell is this? I am the dignified 9th Immortal Master, a high-level existence who controls the yin-yang sky. How can I become your general? Was there a hole in his brain? The old tortoise reminded him, don't be rash. He's waiting for you to leave. This is his little world. Don't fight him head-on. Han Fei thought to himself, don't worry. I'm not an idiot. The Blood King's perception scanned the world again and again. However, with his abilities, he was still unable to examine every single grain of sand in this world in such a short period of time. Therefore, after more than 10 attempts to no avail, the Blood King had no choice but to give up. She heard him say, I have no choice but to admire you. Your concealment ability is really extraordinary. However, it doesn't matter. There is no energy or spiritual energy in this world, and I won't leave a trace of the corpses of these demon plant venerables to you. Since you refuse to come out, just stay in this world. After that, behind the Blood King, a large number of roots stretched out from the void and directly drag him out of this void. It wasn't until the old tortoise said that there was no threat that Han Fei breathed a sigh of relief. However, Han Fei immediately went to Forge the Universe. Forge the Universe. F*CK. Old Yuan, are the demon plants so powerful? The old tortoise said leisurely, what do you think? They are rare. a race that can live many times longer than the Tortoise clan. In the age of gods, there has never been a lack of them. They rarely become the strongest, but they are definitely not weak. In some places, there are even demon plants that become supreme existences, and even the emperors of the heavens have to treat them well. Gudu, Han Fei once again remembered the first lesson that the water immortal taught him, telling him never to underestimate any demon plant. Han Fei was speechless. He had never paid attention to this problem before. Even when he saw the cloud sea divine tree with his own eyes, he felt that they were just unusually tall. In fact, they couldn't transform into human beings, so they shouldn't be so powerful. But now it seemed that he was totally wrong. Han Fei said, "The umbrella he used swallowed the souls of so many venerables. It must be a very powerful treasure." The old tortoise said, "In fact, I have seen such a kind of rare treasure." "Oh," the old tortoise said leisurely, "although the types and functions are different, at least one function is certain. All umbrella-type rare treasures have a common characteristic, which is that they have extremely strong defensive power. The strongest emperor I have ever seen is called the Umbrella Emperor. He crossed the sea with an umbrella. That umbrella has many functions. It can block souls, defend against power, break the laws of space, time, and gravity. 9 out of 10. I have no chance of winning against him." Han Fei, hearing the old tortoise's words, Han Fei felt that the old tortoise was flattering him. However, that umbrella did look extraordinary. Otherwise, how could it collect so many souls so casually? Han Fei snorted. "The Blood King is extremely arrogant. How dare he not take me seriously after I destroyed one of his clones? Son of a b****. Han Fei stayed and forged the universe for half a month. Half a month of cultivation was equivalent to a day in the outside world. Han Fei's purpose was to wait for the nine-palace ruler of Providence to recover. However, he couldn't waste time and forge the universe, could he? Therefore, Han Fei deduced the great desolate body technique that he had grasped. However, the result of the deduction surprised Han Fei. Ancient desolate war body, venerable level, divine quality. Note, an ancient great technique that was passed down in the primitive era. It can attract the evil energy of heaven and earth with a leakless body. In battle, it can absorb other people's fighting intent, hostility, and evil energy. It can grow in battle, make breakthroughs in battle, and strive for glory in battle. Those who practice this technique should have an invincible and fearless heart. This technique can cultivate fighting intent. When the fighting intent is at its strongest, it will help you make a breakthrough. Disadvantage: every battle is crazy to do start. Unknown deduction consumption. 10 wisps of chaotic gas. The cost of this deduction was not small. It was much more expensive than the great desolate body technique. Han Fei deduced all the way from the incomplete monograph on 108 ways of body conditioning to the present, and an ultimate great technique was deduced. Although Han Fei didn't deduce this body tempering technique to the end this time, he was still able to deduce it. However, the pattern of this body tempering technique had changed. It had changed from a pure body tempering technique to a warlike technique. Han Fei studied it for half a month and found that the most powerful thing about this technique was that it could cultivate fighting intent. If he could cultivate enough fighting intent, his combat power would be doubled, and he would fight more and more fiercely until he was exhausted and couldn't fight anymore. But the problem was that he couldn't cultivate fighting intent. The most primitive method was to use time to cultivate a mouthful of war chi. There was another seemingly brilliant method, which was to completely follow one's heart and cultivate. This method was a bit mysterious. Han Fei pondered for a while and continued to read. To cultivate this technique, he needed to cultivate fighting awareness, take the initiative to challenge and attack, and then his fighting intent would grow stronger as he fought. Han Fei even saw the most ridiculous way to deal with it: to be beaten. The more he was beaten, the faster his fighting intent would accumulate. Phew! Han Fei took a breath, indicating that he had understood it all, but he had no way to use it. When the time was up, Han Fei measured it with the nine-palace ruler of Providence. It was a tie. Han Fei left forged the universe boldly. Even though he was relieved, Han Fei still maintained a cautious attitude. He said, "Old Yuan, did you feel any danger?" The old turtle nodded. "No, the Blood King seems to have left." Hearing the old turtle's words, Han Fei's perception immediately swept this world. Huh? Han Fei was stunned on the spot. Is this the 100,000 mountains? The old tortoise looked confused. However, Han Fei quickly appeared on a hill. Han Fei stood on the top of the mountain and thought to himself, sure enough, this is the 100,000 mountains. The space within the 1,000 mountains ancient realm was only a part of it. And this part of the world was the region where the 100,000 mountains Beast King Valley was located. Han Fei was too familiar with this place. Back then, I followed Tiger and the others to pretend to be beasts, thinking every day about how to escape from Ape Lu and the others' pursuit and escape from the Beast King Valley. Speaking of the 100,000 mountains, there is no place more familiar to me than here. Han Fei immediately scanned with his perception. There were more than 6,000 mountains here, but there were no creatures, not even a plant. Han Fei walked through the mountains, his heart cold. At the bottom of the sea, there were all kinds of fossils. A large number of withered demon plant roots were embedded in the mountain. After searching for a long time, Han Fei didn't find any goods at all. His eyes became cold. Since the 1,000 Mountains ancient realm had survived until now, it was impossible that the 1,000 Mountains ancient realm could not. In the 1,000 Mountains ancient realm, the demonic plants were still contributing their life force to the water immortal. Han Fei gnashed his teeth and said, Good. Blood King, there's no way we can conquer this place." Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, what can I do to subdue this place?" The old turtle said unhurriedly, "I'm afraid you don't have the ability to subdue such a large place for now. In theory, there are ways to turn a region into a small world. Otherwise, the experts would store this world in their origin sea, or an enormous storage space like the sun, moon, and star shell. However, it was impossible for even the star shell to contain such a large area. So it's either the heavenly shell or the expert's origin sea. I can only offer these two ways." Han Fei said gloomily, "How can I subdue it?" The old turtle chuckled. "If this world is in the heavenly shell, you just need to find the shell. But if the Blood King has the heavenly shell, he can perceive you at any time. So, it can't be in the heavenly shell. So, this place is very likely to be the origin sea of a certain expert." First update, asking for votes into this chapter. Chapter 16:16. Han Fei was puzzled by the old turtle's conjecture. He said in a daze, "You mean, a king realm expert has put this world into his origin sea?" The old turtle nodded. "Maybe not yet. There are more than 6,000 mountains here. Even my origin sea can't fit them all. Is there an Emperor Realm expert in the Waterwood Heaven? If there is, there must be a lot of resources in the Waterwood Heaven. The Blood King doesn't have to spend so much effort to transcend the tribulation. He could just sweep through the Bai Bei Royal City and the Cloud Sea Divine Tree. There are plenty of resources to help him transcend the tribulation." Han Fei took a breath. "So, this space shouldn't be the origin sea of a certain expert." The old turtle nodded. "Theoretically, it isn't, but accidents happen occasionally. After all, there are all kinds of strange things in this world. Just like your little gourd, it has infinite magical uses. Who can explain it clearly?" Han Fei said, "Anyway, I have to find a way out. As the Blood King said, if I am trapped here, how can I ruin his plan?" Han Fei grabbed the nautical globe and followed the direction of the pointer, wandering among the mountains. In the end, Han Fei came to a mountain that he was familiar with. Is this the place? Han Fei stood on this protruding mountain for a long time. It was here that the giant king sealed him in a boulder and taught him the swallowing technique to absorb the essence fire of the sun. Later, he used it to practice the indestructible body. At that time, it was so hot that he felt as if he were taking a bath in underground magma. This place was not far from the War Giants, the mountain where the heavenly crystal was located in the Beast King Valley. Han Fei looked at the nautical globe in his hand and saw that its pointer was just vibrating. Han Fei reached out and pulled out a knife, tearing the void apart. The next moment, Han Fei stepped into the void. He saw a white light source, which seemed to have been waiting there. Because the 9-Palace Destiny ruler's hexagram was a flat hexagram, Han Fei thought it was just a loophole in space, so he went in without hesitation. As a result, Han Fei appeared in another dark world after he drilled into it. When Han Fei took a closer look, he found that this place, which was less than 1,000 square meters in size, was surrounded by red things. It was as if he was trapped in a sealed wooden space. Before he could study the place, he heard a voice say, "I've been waiting for you for a long time, who?" Han Fei was shocked and felt that his blood was freezing. Wasn't it a tie? Wasn't it a spatial hole? Why was he discovered the moment he came out? The old turtle was surprised. "My perception has been sealed. The newcomer is very strong. I'm afraid he's a King Realm expert." F***CK. The first thing Han Fei thought of was the one in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City, which was also what Han Fei and the old turtle guessed, the reincarnation of the Blood King. Therefore, in an instant, as if facing a formidable enemy, Han Fei pushed the power of the Great Way to the extreme without hesitation. Once he was defeated, he planned to stay and forge the universe and never come out. However, in the darkness, a strange person with the head of a goat and the tail of a fox slowly walked out. When Han Fei saw him, he was dumbfounded. Divine Son? Han Fei would never mistake him for someone else. This person had 2 horns on his head, which were pointing backward. His hair, eyebrows, and beard were all very long, but he looked extremely young. On his shoulders, there were bone spurs protruding from the flesh and blood, like 2 small wings in front of his body. A pair of gray wings were folded behind him, and a long tail was casually dragging on the ground. This was exactly the same as the Divine Son he had seen before. Oh no, there was something different. At that time, the Divine Son was made of flesh and blood, but the body of the Divine Son in front of him was a plant. The appearances he saw were all transformed from the body of a demonic plant. Han Fei immediately narrowed his eyes and said, "You are not the Divine Son. Who are you?" The Divine Son said lightly, "My path is broken. Therefore, I have no hope of becoming a king for life." But when the Beast King was going through the tribulation, the Giant King and the heavenly crystal died on the spot. I burned my divine veins to stop the king. In the end, my divine veins were exhausted. I abandoned my divine veins and reopened the path of the demonic plant clan. After cultivating for 60,000 years, absorbing the essence of heaven and earth, I finally became a king. The Divine Son said these words calmly and explained the ins and outs of the matter. If Han Fei had heard this description for the first time, he might have been confused. However, this was the second time he had heard this. The first time, it was the water deity who told him. At that time, the water deity told him that the Divine Son stopped the king alone and his whereabouts were unknown. Han Fei remembered these words clearly, word for word. Han Fei narrowed his eyes. Who am I? Wang Han. Han Fei was in a black fog at the moment. Ordinary people couldn't find him at all, such as the Blood King. Even if the Divine Son became a king, how could he see through Han Fei's real body? Han Fei asked, "How do you know it's me?" The Divine Son said, "Because the place you came from has the aura you once left." The corner of Han Fei's mouth twitched. "It's been so long. Can it still exist?" The Divine Son said, "It existed before. This is a fact that can't be erased. Anything, as long as it existed, can be found in time." Han Fei narrowed his eyes and said, "Is the path you walk related to time?" The Divine Son nodded. "Yes and no. I've walked several paths, and the Avenue of Time is only one of them. But this path is extremely difficult to figure out. The most I can do is to find a trace of historical remains from the gaps of history." "Then do you know what happened after you switched to the Demonic Plant Clan?" The Divine Son shook his head. "When I woke up, it was already thousands of years later. As a tree, it took me 20,000 years to cultivate my consciousness, 30,000 years to recover my memory, 50,000 years to return to the peak of my strength, and 60,000 years to become a king. A tree. Wow. Han Fei's eyelids twitched, and he said in shock, "Don't tell me your name is the Bloodseed Divine Wood? My little heart can't take this blow." However, the Divine Sun nodded slightly. "Congratulations, you guessed it. Han Fei." Han Fei was shocked. "No. Then, if you're the Bloodseed Divine Wood, then what about the Blood King? What about the endless Millennium Snappers in the Bloodseed Divine Wood City? What's with the dense forest of Big Red Trunk?" Questions popped up in Han Fei's mind one after another. What kind of joke was this? The Divine Sun became the Blood Sea Divine Wood? How could he believe such an absurd and bizarre thing? The Divine Sun said, "Don't worry. There's still a lot of time. I can answer your questions slowly." The Divine Sun waved his hand, and a table and a wine cup appeared in front of him. In the cup, there was the earth vein spring that Han Fei had just robbed. It seemed to be deliberately shown to Han Fei. The Divine Sun said, "First of all, ask the question you want to ask the most." Han Fei was about to open his mouth, but then he stopped and asked, "Why can your origin sea accommodate such a large area of the 100,000 mountains?" The Divine Sun smiled. "Because I have divinity. Even if I abandon the divine heritage, it doesn't mean I have nothing." The old turtle was shocked. "If that's the case, I really have nothing to say. If he is really the son of a god, it doesn't seem very difficult for him to have an origin sea that contains more than 6,000 mountains." The Divine Sun smiled. "You're right and wrong. If he isn't the son of a god, he can't have such a large origin sea. My origin sea is the result of me devouring more and more energy and spiritual energy, causing my cultivation path to deviate from its original path. Just like the Cloud Sea Divine Tree, his origin sea can't be small." Han Fei's eyes widened, and the old turtle exclaimed, "He can hear me? His soul is comparable to that of an emperor." The Divine Sun shook his head again. "It's not that my soul is comparable to that of an emperor, but that you are too weak. Your soul is incomplete. Even if your realm is very high, it is incomplete after all." Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Okay, let's not talk about this. Let me continue." "Okay." The Divine Sun drank a cup of earth vein spring and waited for Han Fei's question calmly. Han Fei immediately asked, "Is there a reincarnation of the Blood King?" The Divine Sun nodded. "Yes." Han Fei asked, "Is that reincarnation going to transcend a tribulation?" The Divine Sun nodded. "Are you helping him transcend a tribulation?" The Divine Sun nodded. "Yes." Han Fei asked why. The Divine Sun looked at Han Fei seriously. "Because I was parasitized by him." "Huh?" Han Fei was stunned. "What do you mean you were parasitized by him? You are a king, but you were parasitized by a half-king? Is this a joke?" The Divine Sun knew that Han Fei was puzzled, so he said slowly, "The reincarnation of the Blood King is called Xue Fan. He appeared here 30,000 years ago. At that time, I had already become a king, but the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua hadn't. When Xue Fan was sent here, he was already dying. I saw that his demonic heritage was extraordinary, so I took him in. His original body was the big red trunk you saw, but he was not like those you saw. He was the strongest talent of this clan. It only took him 1,000 years to cultivate to the half-king realm. Until Xue Fan became a half-king, his temperament was not bad, and he was always very gentle, staying with me. Until he faced the King Tribulation. The White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua passed the King Tribulation one after another. When it was his turn, the Heavenly Tribulation didn't come, and the spiritual energy and energy here were no longer enough to support him to become a king. Gradually, his heart began to twist, and he intended to win a chance for himself to become a king through alternative methods. So, he chose to blossom and bear fruit. The fruit was called the Red Ball, a second chapter. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 16-17. As the Divine Sun, who was now the Bloodseed Divine Wood, spoke, Han Fei had completely believed that the Bloodseed Divine Wood was the Divine Sun. Han Fei even tested it with the Navigator in his heart. The Navigator was indeed pointing at the wood-like Divine Sun in front of him. According to the Divine Sun's description, This Blood King was not a bad guy. It was just that he was too talented. His pride made him unable to accept the reality that he couldn't become a king. Therefore, he became cruel and his mind became active. He believed that the energy in the world was completely enough for him to become a king. The White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen could become kings because they had absorbed enough energy of heaven and earth and must have absorbed a lot of chaotic chi. In addition to the chaotic chi, these two people had one characteristic, which was that they were the leaders of a race. Therefore, Xue Fan also wanted to become the leader of a race. Therefore, he created a race alone, which was the Millennium Snapper. Even though these Millennium Snappers were transformed from other creatures. After the transformation, they became his clansmen. Only when they believed in him would they be bestowed with more and become stronger. Xue Fan knew that he couldn't make any mistakes in his tribulation this time. Therefore, he chose to recultivate for the second time. Yes, this guy completely gave up his half-king realm power and recultivated from scratch. However, this recultivation was not a casual recultivation. He knew that the Shuemu heaven could only provide him with limited space. Even though he had already found all the resources for himself from the beginning to the end. However, he still couldn't rest assured. At this point, he found that there had always been a strong master around him. A Bloodsea Divine would that had become a king before the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen. Therefore, Xue Fan turned his attention to the Bloodsea Divine Wood. Han Fei could understand that in the 100,000 mountains, everyone acted according to their nature. Xue Fan, in addition to creating the Red Ball, relatively speaking, he just wanted to become stronger at that time. And the Divine Son had always been a bit arrogant, and he often regarded himself as a god. How could a god think of intervening or killing people? After all, at that time, Xue Fan hadn't become a king yet. All below the king level were ants. This was not nonsense. If the Divine Son had wanted to kill Xue Fan at that time, Xue Fan wouldn't have survived. However, it was precisely because of the god's attitude that Xue Fan had an opportunity to take advantage of. He used his original body to plant new seeds, saying that he wanted to guard the Bloodsea Divine Tree. He built this place into a kingdom. Since then, Xue Fan had been secretly researching the parasitic Tao. It took him more than 20,000 years to change the temperature around the Bloodsea Divine Wood, bit by bit, quietly. What really allowed the Blood King to successfully parasitize was when the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua joined forces to attack the Bloodsea Divine Wood city. Back then, it was not because Xue Fan was able to defeat the two of them. The main reason was that the God's Son had intervened. As for Xue Fan, he took advantage of the God's Son's attack to activate the parasitism that he had been accumulating for 20,000 years. According to the Divine Son, the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua's attack on the Bloodsea Divine Wood city might have been orchestrated by Xue Fan. Xue Fan had waited 20,000 years for the day he could become a parasite. When the Divine Prince finished his story, Han Fei was shocked. Damn it, this guy is definitely a ruthless man. Xue Fan was really a very inspiring evil demon. He had brought evil to a certain level. This guy was too heartless. The Divine Prince had helped him a lot, but in the end, he was used by him. Han Fei took a deep breath. So now, he has your power? The Divine Prince shook his head. Yes and no. After all, when he parasitized me, he was not a king. I retained part of the origin, so he couldn't find it before he became a king. I did leave a few backup plans, but he had already destroyed 2 of them. Han Fei's eyes widened. He even predicted your backup plans? The Divine Prince said leisurely. As soon as he launched the parasite, I was fighting with the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua. During this time, I established a connection with Mu Wuhua. Later, I began to communicate with Mu Wuhua with the power of the earth veins. However, Xue Fan was also a demonic plant. He soon discovered that something was wrong with the earth veins. So, he sowed many more big red trunks. Now, hundreds of thousands of kilometers around me are all under his control. Han Fei asked, what about the other backup plan? There was a trace of anger in the Divine Prince's eyes. That's my origin C. Because I intended to send demonic plants to Mu Wuhua, Xue Fan tracked me down and sneaked into the origin C, causing most of the demonic plants and some ordinary demonic beasts here die. At that time, I consumed part of the origin and seriously injured him. And because I couldn't use much power, that part of the origin was also devoured by him. Han Fei listened to all this as if he was listening to a book from heaven. It was not an exaggeration to say that the contest between a half-king and a king for tens of thousands of years was wonderful. The Divine Prince looked at Han Fei. When I found that, I could no longer stop it. I didn't expose myself anymore and waited for you. Han Fei asked, "Oh, you knew I would show up?" The Divine Prince said, when Mu Wuhua discussed countermeasures with me. He once mentioned a place called the Yin-Yang Heaven, where islands were suspended in the air. You should know that, not long after you left the Age of Doom, the secret of the floating stone was discovered. This made us realize that a new era was coming. And you should be born in this new era. So, I was waiting for you. Although the Divine Prince said it lightly, Han Fei felt that the Divine Prince should be panicking. Because he came too late, and he didn't come until Xue Fan was about to go through the tribulation. Moreover, he had come here by a freak combination of factors. It could be imagined that with Xue Fan's character, once he became a king and had enough strength, the first thing he would take down would be the Blood-Sea Divine Wood, that is, the Divine Prince. Only in that way could he consolidate his position. And if he completely devoured the power of a king, it could be imagined how strong Xue Fan would be at that time. The old tortoise couldn't help but sigh. This person really should have entered the crooked path. He has perseverance, courage, strategy, courage. If he succeeds, I'm afraid that his achievements will not be low. If he becomes a king, the Waterwood Heaven and the Yin-Yang Heaven will be his sooner or later. Han Fei remembered that the Blood-Sea Divine Wood City never participated in the battle between the Baibei Royal City and the Waterwood Heaven. Only then did he understand that it was not that they didn't fight, but that they were fighting for the big world. As the saying goes, there is peace before the storm. The one who survived to the end was the king. This sentence was so appropriate for Xue Fan. Han Fei took a breath. Then what should I do now? The Divine Prince said, You should have your own independent small world, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have completely disappeared from my origin sea, and even I couldn't find you. Also, with your current body, if you weren't in my origin sea, I might not have been able to find you. Han Fei said, Xue Fan won't find me, will he? The Divine Prince shook his head. Although he can parasitize me, he is not me after all. He can force some choices for me, but he can't feel my feelings. In short, he hasn't become a king yet, and the path of parasitism hasn't reached a higher level. Once he becomes a king, he may completely devour my soul and turn me into his incarnation. Son of a b****, Han Fei murmured, thinking Xue Fan's wishful thinking is too obvious. Han Fei asked, Then where are we now? The Divine Prince replied, In my absolute domain. This is the only place that Xue Fan hasn't discovered so far. Han Fei breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. What are you going to do? The Divine Prince smiled slightly. What are you going to do? What I can do now is very limited. However, I can forcibly take back control of my body in a short time. But this time won't be long. And once I do this, my domain will be discovered. Han Fei narrowed his eyes and said, Master Divine Prince, where are his resources? Tell me his location, and I'll steal everything he has. The Divine Prince glanced at Han Fei and said leisurely, A few months ago, from the moment you ruined his plan in the cage below, all his resources have been collected by yourself. He didn't put any of them outside. Han Fei, why is he so cautious? Han Fei was immediately speechless. However, he could understand that a person who could plan for tens of thousands of years to transcend a tribulation naturally wouldn't let his 10,000 years of planning go to waste because of such a trivial matter. Han Fei said, When is he going to transcend the tribulation? Or, how is he going to transcend the tribulation? In this so-called absolute domain, Han Fei and the Divine Prince chatted for a long time. In fact, what the Divine Prince could do was indeed limited, but he knew a lot of information. From beginning to end, the Divine Prince never mentioned the Water Fairy, nor did Han Fei. Although it was very likely that the divine prince also knew that the water fairy had something to do with Mu Wu Hua, Han Fei was worried. If things didn't work out, he couldn't let Xue Fan know these secrets through the divine prince. So, why did he mention the water fairy? Half a day later, when Han Fei quietly left this so-called absolute domain, he had already quietly appeared in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. However, what he saw in front of him was a prosperous scene. Han Fei found that this turned out to be a country where humans were hiding. Oh no, to be precise, it was a country where the Millennium Snappers had transformed into humans and lived. The point was it was all F***king women, not a single man. Their clothes. Han Fei couldn't bear to look at them. F***ck. Don't look. Female skeletons, all skeletons. Third night, asking for votes. Into this chapter. Chapter 16-18. The Divine Prince was still alive. Although he had cultivated himself into a tree, Han Fei was still very happy. However, Han Fei really couldn't make up his mind about Xue Fan's tribulation. Han Fei's first thought was to find the Life Queen, preferably with the White Armor Emperor. How could he bring the White Armor Emperor along? It was none of Han Fei's business. In any case, he had to inform them of this matter, although they would definitely know when Xue Fan was going through his tribulation. However, knowing in advance and being passively aware were two different things. Secondly, the Divine Sun had told him that the umbrella in Xue Fan's hand contained more than 300 venerable realm expert souls. That umbrella was used to resist the heavenly tribulation. According to the Divine Prince's estimation, that thing could withstand 3 heavenly tribulations. At that moment, Han Fei felt terrible. Xue Fan was obviously not going through the 6th tribulation, but the 9th tribulation. However, it was simply unimaginable that a single weapon could block 3 heavenly tribulations. In fact, Han Fei quite admired Xue Fan's ruthlessness. In these tens of thousands of years, Xue Fan had secretly swallowed over 300 of them. Those were all experts that fellow had raised himself. In the end, if a bunch of leaks were cut down, those supremacies would probably be dumbfounded. Furthermore, when Xue Fan was devouring them, he had found all sorts of reasons to draw them away so that others would not suspect him. It could be said that most of the people in the Blood Sea Sacredwood City believed in him and did not doubt him at all. From this, one could see how treacherous Xue Fan was. As a matter of fact, this was the first time that Han Fei had seen an evil king. This was much better than a king like the White Armor Emperor, who only knew how to fight. What Han Fei appeared at this moment was the core of the Blood Sea Divine Wood, an area between the seawater and the seabed, surrounded by tall, big red trunk, many of which grew around the Blood Sea Divine Wood. Most of the people living here were explorers. According to the Divine Sun, Xue Fan had purposely set the living standards to be so strict. Venerables had their own residences, and every level of explorer also had their own residences. Yilong was at the peak of a beginner explorer and was about to become an intermediate explorer. Because of her outstanding talent and combat ability, she was the pride of the beginner explorers. Yilong loved to fight and had gone out to fight a few times over the years. Her methods were becoming more and more extraordinary. After his true nature as a prodigy was discovered, he participated in 7 consecutive hunts and emerged victorious. At that moment, Yilong was on his way home. Many people greeted her when they saw her. Someone grinned. "Lord Yilong, are you back from your cultivation?" Yilong replied indifferently, "Yes." Someone said, "Sister Long, when will you take me to the battlefield? I heard that it's a place for rapid growth." Yilong's expression did not change. "I'm free." Someone stretched out a slender hand and slid it across Yilong's waist. Her eyes were as clear as the autumn water, and her red lips parted slightly. "Long, come to my residence tonight for a chat. I have some cultivation insights, and I would like to discuss them with you." Yilong frowned slightly. She was a little unhappy and even snorted softly to express her dissatisfaction. With a cold and aloof attitude, he circled around these people and quickly found a tree burl. He opened the seal with familiarity and crawled inside. "Who?" Yilong's brows relaxed. Although she had lived here for a long time, she still couldn't accept the open gay community life in the Bloodsea Divinewood City. She couldn't remember how many times she had been dragged into someone else's cave. Just when Yilong was about to clear her mind and enter cultivation, a voice suddenly sounded in her mind. Fish Dragon King, it seems that you have a good life in this Bloodsea Divinewood City. You are very happy. The Fish Dragon King trembled all over and finally stretched his body, whispering, "How did you get in?" Han Fei was not afraid that his words would be heard by Xue Fan. Although he already knew that all the Millennium Snappers were parasitized by Xue Fan. So what? Parasitism didn't mean that he could completely know all the senses and thoughts of these billions of Millennium Snappers. When there were more people, the words and thoughts produced would become messy. In order not to affect the normal life and cultivation of the Millennium Snappers, the parasitism would usually not be activated. Besides, there was the barrier of the old Turtle Emperor's soul and his 9-palace ruler of Providence, which ensured the safety of his actions. Han Fei said leisurely, "It doesn't matter how I got in. What's important is that you have something to do now." The Fish Dragon King's expression changed many times, thinking, I still can't get rid of Han Fei after all. In the past few years, she had changed her appearance and became a heavenly talent again, admired by countless people. However, as soon as Han Fei appeared, she felt that all these were just illusions and unrealistic. The Fish Dragon King asked, "What is it?" Han Fei said, "Help me send something out of the Bloodsea Divinewood City. After this is done, your mission will be completed. I will never come to you again. You are free." The Fish Dragon King was shocked. "Really?" Han Fei chuckled. "Why are you still not willing?" The Fish Dragon King took a breath and said, "You spent so much effort to send me and just to let me go out and send something out of the Bloodsea Divinewood City." A sun moon shell floated in front of the Fish Dragon King, and Han Fei said leisurely, "I spent so much effort to get you in. Not my business. That was the way it was. You could do it or not do it. You can even give the thing I give you to Xue Fan when you go out. It's up to you." The Fish Dragon King was puzzled. Who is Xue Fan? Han Fei was stunned for a moment and then chuckled. "You don't even know the king of your Bloodsea Divinewood City? You are really weak." The Fish Dragon King's heart also sank. "I have never seen a king in the Bloodsea Divinewood City for so many years. How did Han Fei know? Besides, how did Han Fei sneak in? And he can't even see a person?" The Fish Dragon King certainly knew that she was no match for Han Fei. As early as in the beginning, Han Fei no longer regarded explorers as opponents. Now, he even dared to plot against the king? What couldn't this guy do? Although the Fish Dragon King still hated Han Fei in her heart, she didn't dare to disobey him at this moment. She said, "Are you sure? After doing this, you will let me go completely?" A bead appeared. When the Ichthyosaur King saw the blood bead, his heart skipped a beat. That was his own blood essence. Han Fei just threw it to her so casually. Han Fei said, "For me, you are too weak. You're no longer qualified to be my pawn. Give me this, and I will set you free." Gulp! The Fish Dragon King swallowed, and her eyes became firmer. To whom? After a while, the Fish Dragon King left the house and went to a small tree burl. She knocked on it casually, and then a cute little fish head popped out. "Sister Long? Do you want to go to the frontline battlefield?" The value of the Fish Dragon King was so great. In the Sun Moon shell, Han Fei put a puppet corpse. It was just that Han Fei had placed a wisp of his soul in this corpse. As long as the Fish Dragon King sent it out quietly, she would find a way to leave. What Han Fei really wanted was not the Fish Dragon King. It was already a great honor for the Fish Dragon King to be a courier. On the other side, on the edge of a tree city a little far from the Bloodsea Divinewood, there was a circle of tall, big red trunk. There were tens of millions of Millennium Snappers cultivating here. In this city, almost half of the city was still selling various items and resources. Usually, this was a market that would only appear in a civilized society. But for different races, especially strange races like the Millennium Snappers, it was quite novel for them to appear in this kind of place. But here, there was a large shop named Idle Cloud Pawn Shop. A person was directly kicked out of the pawn shop, and it was a peak-level law Millennium Snapper. Immediately afterward, a woman came out of the pawn shop and said in a cold voice, "The pawn shop has its own rules. If you don't have enough resources to exchange, or if you exceed the prescribed time, you will be killed. Your things no longer belong to you." The Millennium Snapper, who was kicked out, trembled with anger. "What a human! Don't wait for me to find an opportunity. Otherwise, I will not let you go." After the man left, at the door of the pawn shop behind the woman, a woman said, "Rune, there are still too few people on our side. Even if you are a heavenly talent and have become an intermediate explorer, you can't spend all your time in our territory." Yangreen said lightly, "I understand. When I become the Venerable One, no one will come to our territory to make trouble." After a while, Yangreen had just returned to the pawn shop, preparing to cultivate directly behind the pawn shop. In this way, it would be more convenient for her to take care of the territory. Suddenly, a voice came in her mind. "I have a deal, which may be the biggest deal since you opened the pawn shop or since you turned into a demon. Are you interested?" "Who is it?" Yangreen suddenly opened her eyes and looked in all directions. The surroundings were blocked by prohibitions. Who could directly send a voice transmission to her? Han Fei said leisurely, "What? I gave you a few big gifts and the head of the Fish Dragon King. And you forgot me? It's you?" As early as the battle on the island, she knew that Han Fei's strength had crushed her in all aspects. However, Han Fei gave her several big benefits in a row. After all, she was also confused. She didn't know what Han Fei's purpose was. At this moment, Han Fei's appearance even untied the knot in her heart. Yang Ruoyun's reaction was calmer than the Fish Dragon King's. She and Han Fei had made deals more than once or twice. In the past, she cheated him a lot. But now, she had been led by Han Fei. Yang Ruoyun said calmly, "Where are you?" Han Fei said, "Don't worry about where I am. I just want to ask you, do you want to make this deal or not? If you do, you need to swear to the Tao." Yang Ruoyun's eyes narrowed slightly. "What deal?" First update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 16-19. Han Fei didn't prepare much in advance. He only had 2 chess pieces in total, and he had used both of them. As for the rest, he would have to make it himself. Han Fei didn't expect Xue Fan to take action so soon. After all, Xue Fan had just killed so many monster plant venerables. You shouldn't be going through the tribulation now. At the very least, you have to refine it, right? However, on the 3rd day, when Han Fei was wandering in the Bloodsea Divinewood City, suddenly, venerables ran amok. On the way, he saw a lot of Millennium Snappers returning from outside the Bloodsea Divinewood City. Then, the voice of the Venerable echoed in the surroundings. "A Grand Monarch is going through the Monarch Tribulation in the Bloodsea Divinewood City. From today onwards, no one is allowed to enter or leave. All of you, immediately stop what you are doing and begin your seclusion. Once the heavenly tribulation descends, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth will converge. This is a rare opportunity that only appears once in 10,000 years." All the Millennium Snappers below the venerable level in the divine city of Bloodsea were shocked. "What? King's tribulation? Which Grand Monarch is this? Is he trying to transcend tribulation and become a monarch? What? Is our Bloodsea Divinewood City going to welcome our 3rd king? Quickly, return to residence and cultivate. Such a golden opportunity couldn't be missed. Who knows, today might be the day we break through. Not to mention someone going through the king's tribulation. Even if someone became a venerable, it would be extremely rare for ordinary people to see them. Most of the Millennium Snappers were like caged fish. He lived his entire life on the territory of the Bloodsea Divinewood City that he could see. These people were easily fooled, but Han Fei was not stupid. He exclaimed in shock, "No way. Didn't this person need to prepare for his monarch tribulation? Breaking through already? Is he playing?" The old tortoise said, "There's something even more unexpected. Do you know where he went through his tribulation?" Han Fei wondered. "Where?" The old turtle said, "Right above the Bloodsea Divinewood City. You might not be afraid of the Bloodsea Divinewood. This meant that he was confident that he had completely parasitized the Blood Sea Divine Wood. He regarded the Blood Sea Divine Wood as his outer body incarnation. Ha! What an arrogant and conceited fellow. Let's go. Let's go take a look. Outside the Blood Sea Sacred Wood City, the Fish Dragon King realized that it could not return. The Blood Sea Divine Wood City was sealed as if something big had happened. The Fish Dragon King didn't dare to say anything, so it just stayed outside. As long as it could stay away from the Forbidden Land, Han Fei could do whatever he wanted. After that, it would go back and be a top heavenly talent. Compared to the Ichthyosaur King, Yang Ryun was the one who was really scared. She knew that Han Fei would make trouble, but she didn't expect that Han Fei would make such a big one. Han Fei suddenly appeared, and a Grand Master was going to transcend the King's tribulation? Is Han Fei powerful enough to interfere with the King's tribulation? Beside Yang Ryun, a few followers were still exclaiming in shock. Yang Ryun said, "Quick, finish what you're doing and go back into seclusion." Back in the Waterwood Sky, everyone knew that tribulation transcendence couldn't be done on the Cloud Sea Divine Tree. However, Xue Fan was undergoing his tribulation in the sky. The old tortoise naturally wouldn't lie to him. So what was the reason? Old Yuan, since the Divine Prince can meet me, it means that he's still alive. If Xue Fan transcends his tribulation in this way, isn't he courting death? But the old tortoise was silent for a moment and said, "Not necessarily." Han Fei's face changed. "What's going on?" The old tortoise explained. As normal people know, half-kings and pseudo-kings are all venerables, and it's impossible for venerables to challenge kings. However, things are not absolute. For example, those with particularly strong talents and bloodlines can also kill kings. This proves that the so-called kings are only in the sea expansion realm. It doesn't mean that those below the sea expansion realm are invincible. As for people like Xue Fan, he has been cultivating with sorcery for tens of thousands of years. Although he has not been able to completely replace the Blood Sea Divine Tree, his great Tao is special. His body is most likely fused with the Blood Sea Divine Tree. The heavenly tribulations may also misjudge. Han Fei gasped. The heavenly tribulation misjudge? Do you mean that he can ask the Divine Prince to help him resist the heavenly tribulation? Are you kidding me? The Divine Prince has become a king, and a king can resist the venerable heavenly tribulation? Isn't that easy? In a moment, the two had reached the top of the Blood Sea Divine Tree. During this period, Han Fei carefully avoided contact with everything around him. Xue Fan was a parasite, and his comprehensive strength was not weak at all. Most of the things that Han Fei saw were parasites of him. Whether it was the Millennium Snapper, the Big Red Trunk, or the Blood Sea Divine Tree, everything here seemed to be dominated by Xue Fan. When Han Fei came out of the sea and saw the sky, he only saw raging waves within 10,000 kilometers. Above the sky, thunder was roaring. The clouds were rolling, and the lightning was like dragons. It looked like the end of the world. Xue Fan stood in the air, looking down at the sky. Around him, a big black umbrella was spinning. Han Fei's heart sank. Is this guy really going to transcend the tribulation now? Han Fei was uneasy. It was too fast. All his arrangements might not work. Xue Fan had already transcended the tribulation. Didn't he need to prepare at all? Or had he been preparing for tens of thousands of years? Rumble, about an hour later, the heavenly tribulation seemed to be almost ready. The lightning in the sky was getting stronger and stronger. Xue Fan smiled and even looked down. Then he turned his head and shouted, "Tribulation is coming." Seriously? Han Fei was speechless. This son of AB *TCH was really going to transcend the tribulation. This was completely beyond Han Fei's expectation. It was probably beyond the Divine Prince's expectation too. Crack, 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 the lightning in the sky seemed to be gathering. Boom, phew, Xue Fan reached out to the sky and hundreds of millions of roots formed a cage, locking himself in it. Crack, the thick lightning directly enveloped Xue Fan. Only at this moment did Han Fei realize that Xue Fan had really started. He wondered if the Fish Dragon King could make it in time. The first lightning was the least powerful. Han Fei could only see the lightning arcs penetrating into Xue Fan's body through the broken cage. He was clad in a blood-red battle suit and armor. Beneath Xue Fan's feet, a large, round ball wrapped in wood had appeared at an unknown time. His roots were all in that ball. Xue Fan reached out to resist the first lightning. His armor wasn't broken, his blood didn't bleed, and his long hair fluttered in the wind. The old turtle couldn't help but say, "This man is too powerful. I'm afraid that the heavenly tribulation may not be able to kill him." Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Just say that you think this guy can survive the heavenly tribulation. I know he's extraordinary, but that's one thing. Right now, we have to think about how to destroy him." A lightning fell. 2 lightning bolts rose. In the second lightning bolt, Xue Fan was still safe. Han Fei saw that cracks appeared on Xue Fan's fingers. This meant that Xue Fan also had a limit. However, Xue Fan didn't care at all. He didn't even use the big black umbrella. Facing the third lightning bolt, Xue Fan raised his hand, and 4 vines stretched out from the void and whipped the sky. After completing this action, Xue Fan actually opened his arms and embraced the thunderbolts. Above the void, there was a wild roar. Xue Fan laughed proudly. "The heavenly tribulation will strengthen my body. 30,000 years ago, you didn't come to the last tribulation. I like to see, will you come today? If you don't come today, I will forcibly become a king. What can you do?" Boom! The lightning bolts fell, but Xue Fan didn't step back at all. Electric arcs flashed on his body, and cracks appeared on his battle suit. Han Fei didn't know if it was because his foundation was too strong. 3 consecutive lightning bolts didn't even push him back half a step. Seeing this scene, Han Fei couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh my God, just how strong is this fellow?" The old turtle said, "Each heavenly tribulation is stronger than the last." In the age of immortals, there were many peerless heavenly talents who could withstand lightning bolts with their bodies. Not to mention 3, there are even some who have endured 6. Han Fei asked, "Are you talking about me?" The old turtle said, "You didn't withstand it either, the third one, and your body was blown apart." Han Fei didn't feel good at all. He wanted to say, "At that time, I was only an intermediate venerable and hadn't reached the peak. How could I be the same as now?" However, Han Fei recalled that if he went up now, he would only be able to withstand 3 lightning bolts at most. But then, Xue Fan's strength refreshed Han Fei's view. The 4th lightning bolt, and Xue Fan's battle suit was shattered. The 5th lightning bolt, and Xue Fan was hit on the top of the Blood-Sea Divine Wood. With the support of the Blood-Sea Divine Wood, a large amount of earth veins spring flowed into his body, and Xue Fan quickly recovered. This guy really took 2 more lightning bolts with his body. At this moment, the big ball that the roots of Xue Fan's feet pierced was still intact. More importantly, the Divine Prince said that Xue Fan's big black umbrella that could withstand 3 lightning bolts hadn't been used yet. When Xue Fan endured 5 lightning bolts in a row, Han Fei couldn't sit still anymore. The white mist activated the 9 Palace Providence ruler and forged the universe. As a result, the ruler fell on the word desperate. How long had it been? He was in a desperate situation again. Han Fei took a breath and threw 3 strands of chaotic energy into it, trying to change his luck. However, after the 3 strands of chaotic energy entered the Providence ruler, they didn't even make a ripple. At this moment, the 6th lightning bolt fell, and Xue Fan's upper arm was blown into pieces, and his body was split in half. Han Fei knew that he couldn't wait any longer. What earth vein? This guy didn't need to rely on the earth vein to sustain himself at all. He had survived until now with only his body. This meant that if Xue Fan could survive 1 more lightning bolt, with the help of the big black umbrella, he would probably pass the king's tribulation. How could Han Fei let this happen? Immediately, all 10 strands of chaotic energy were stuffed into the 9 Palace Providence ruler. At this moment, the 9 Palace Providence ruler finally changed the desperate situation into the impermanent hexagram. Han Fei's heart sank. Once he entered the impermanent state, the hexagram was irreversible. It seemed that the only way to change the desperate situation hexagram was to change it into impermanent. During the whole process, The old turtle was watching and seemed to be thinking about something. Seeing that Han Fei seemed to be desperate, the old turtle said, Han Fei, do you want to wait a little longer? I feel that it's a bit strange. Second, asking for votes into this chapter. Chapter 16:20. What are we waiting for? If we wait any longer, he'll become a king. The next bolt of lightning was about to appear. The void shook, and a green vine swept across the sky. On the other side, a giant shell flew across the sky. The giant shell opened its mouth, and the void collapsed as it charged at the tribulation. The two kings attacked at the same time, their power overwhelming, as if the sea was overturned. Angry waves rolled up thousands of meters, and vines and roots intertwined in the sky. The two kings attacked at the same time. The White Armor Emperor tried to interfere with Xue Fan, who was undergoing the tribulation. The Life Queen attacked the branches of the Bloodsea Divine Wood in the void. At the same time, her roots swept for thousands of miles and directly pierced into the earth veins within the Bloodsea Divine Wood city. Seeing this scene, Han Fei was greatly relieved. It seemed that the Fish Dragon King had done a good job. In the puppet that the Fish Dragon King sent out, Han Fei only told the Life Queen the simplest operation. Work with the White Armor Emperor to destroy the earth veins first, then stop the King tribulation. But although the Life Queen's first thing was to destroy the earth veins, they were obviously a bit late. After all, when they arrived, Xue Fan had already begun his tribulation. At this time, it was a battle between the three kings, and Han Fei wasn't ready to take action. Han Fei thought that the Nine-Palace Destiny ruler would predict that he would take action. However, if he didn't take action, he would just be a spectator. Han Fei somewhat regretted the 13 streams of chaotic energy that he had given her. The old turtle said, "Don't be happy too early. Your goal hasn't been fully achieved. They're still too late." Even if you didn't inform them, the two of them should have arrived by now. Someone is undergoing the king tribulation. As kings, it's impossible for them not to sense it. They just didn't expect that Xue Fan would be undergoing the tribulation right above the Bloodsea Divine Wood. Han Fei's face was gloomy. His original plan was actually very clear. Xue Fan had been managing the earth veins of the Bloodsea Divine Wood city for many years. Hence, regardless of whether it was the Ichthyosaur King's message, or borrowing the power of Yang Ruiyun's human converts, or even his 2 days of wandering around the Bloodsea Sacred Wood city, it was all to destroy Xue Fan's advantage of the earth meridians. Once the earth veins were broken, the Divine Sun turned around to fight back, and the two monarchs arrived. Han Fei couldn't figure it out. Without the help of a king, how could Xue Fan survive the tribulation and become a king all by himself? At this moment, high up in the sky, Xue Fan seemed to have gone crazy. He was enraged and laughed maniacally. "The two of you, do you think you can deal with me like this? When I become a king, the two of you will perish. Patriarch Bloodsea, take action." As Mu Wuhua destroyed the earth veins in a frenzy, he said, "Attack." At that moment, Xue Fan ordered the Bloodsea Divine Wood to attack. As for the White Armor Emperor, he thought that Mu Wuhua was asking him to make a move. He thought to himself, "I'm making a move now." Bang, bang, bang. However, in the next moment, within a range of 100,000 li, at least 100 earth veins erupted. Roots suddenly surged, breaking through the waves and sweeping through the great red trunk forest. On Xue Fan's side, he had already entered the tribulation. However, he never expected that the Bloodsea Divine Wood would actually move at this moment. Unexpectedly, the Bloodsea Divine Wood was also unscrupulously destroying things. However, although the Bloodsea Divine Wood was destroying, it didn't attack Xue Fan. Therefore, the White Armor Emperor thought that the Life Queen had done something to the Bloodsea Divine Wood. At this time, the White Armor Emperor hesitated. Is the Life Queen already so powerful? Has she already extended her hand to the Bloodsea Divine Wood city? Boom! The seventh bolt of lightning fell. Xue Fan's fingers cracked, and he shouted, "Parasite!" At that moment, a blood-colored scroll appeared in Xue Fan's hand. With a flip of the scroll, 100,000 living souls appeared in the sky. At this moment, Xue Fan finally used other means. Moreover, Xue Fan's attack was too ruthless. One strike was 100,000 living souls. The living souls that could last for so long must at least be experts in the law enforcer realm. With just one bolt of lightning, 100,000 living souls were instantly annihilated. Xue Fan grabbed the branch of the Bloodseed Divine wood and shouted, "What's the use of betraying me now?" Xue Fan grinned hideously. "I bet that the two of you don't dare to enter my tribulation. It's over." Xue Fan's body exploded, but it quickly spun and gathered in an instant. Han Fei's heart sank. Damn it, can't the two kings kill people? He heard the old turtles say, they really can't go in. The monarch tribulation was definitely not an ordinary tribulation. It was a test that the great Tao had for the person undergoing the tribulation. Transcending the tribulation together and forcefully barging into someone else's tribulation were two different things. Once you force your way in, you'll be violating the rules of the great Tao. How can the might of heaven tolerate you? Han Fei took a deep breath and looked at Xue Fan, whose body was rapidly regenerating. He suddenly remembered that Peaceful had told him that the White Armor Emperor had gone through the heavenly tribulation first, and the Life Queen had gone through the heavenly tribulation after. If it could be destroyed, the White Armor of the Arch would have been destroyed a long time ago, and the Life Queen wouldn't have become a monarch. However, just because they couldn't enter the tribulation didn't mean they couldn't fight outside. The Life Queen used a wisp of green vine as a spear and shot out like a heavenly tribulation. The poison barrier descended, and Xue Fan's body was being corroded. This was the first time that Han Fei had seen Mu Wuhua use poison. So the Life Queen was a poison cultivator? The White Armor Emperor didn't stop attacking. All kinds of energy spears and shell shadows were thrown at Wang Jie. However, it was difficult to defy the might of heaven. Although you could threaten the person who was going through the heavenly tribulation would attack external forces immediately. Therefore, the White Armor Emperor's attack couldn't affect Xue Fan at all. Parasite. From the void of space, one corroded root after another reached out. In the blink of an eye, there were millions of them. Xue Fan said disdainfully, "Poison. I forgot to tell you that apart from parasites, my great Tao can also devour." At that moment, Xue Fan's handsome appearance turned into an ugly man with pustules all over his body. However, he didn't die. The 8th lightning bolt crashed down, and Xue Fan directly threw out the blood-colored scroll in his hand. All the living souls in it shot out. There were as many as 1,000,000 of them. At that moment, whether it was Han Fei, the Life Queen, or the White Armor Emperor, they were all horrified. How King Cruel was this person? 1,000,000 lives were sacrificed just for him to go through the heavenly tribulation? However, Xue Fan didn't care at all. He looked at the Life Queen and the White Armor Emperor coldly, with disdain in his eyes. At this moment, the lightning bolt fell from the sky, and the millions of living souls disappeared. Finally, when the lightning bolt landed on Xue Fan's body, he actually swallowed it all. Although a large part of his body collapsed, he took this lightning bolt. Han Fei thought to himself, not good. That big black umbrella should be used to face the last tribulation. Han Fei remembered that the old turtle once told him that the Umbrella Emperor of his generation could block anything with an umbrella in his hand. This thing could not only be used as a heavenly tribulation, but also to block extraterrestrial demons, right? Han Fei took a deep breath. Why did he think that a guy who had prepared for tens of thousands of years had to rely on the power of the earth vein to resist the heavenly tribulation? Han Fei even thought that this Xue Fan should have known of his existence a long time ago. So, was it possible that he was waiting for him to absorb the earth vein? Did he mislead him into thinking that he needed to rely on the earth vein to consolidate the advantage of the earth vein? If Xue Fan could even calculate this, Han Fei would have to admit defeat. But at this moment, the 8th lightning bolt had been passed, and Han Fei couldn't wait any longer. The White Armor Emperor sent out a small sapphire shell, which contained extremely high energy, and it fell into the lightning bolt. The Life Queen threw a fruit, and wherever the fruit passed, the void trembled. At this moment, Han Fei couldn't sit still and wait for death. He knew better than anyone that once Xue Fan succeeded in transcending the tribulation, not only would the Divine Son die, but also the Life Queen and the White Armor Emperor would be no match for him. The Waterwood Heaven would be ruled by Xue Fan. At that moment, a body of black mist rose into the sky. Compared to others, Han Fei was just a body of black mist. He didn't care if the body of black mist would be destroyed by the lightning bolt. Anyway, he was immortal, and he still had the body of white mist. The moment Han Fei made his move, he forgot the divination of the desperate situation calculated by the Nine-Palace ruler of Providence. Perhaps because the desperate situation had become unpredictable, it gave him the confidence to launch a sneak attack. At that moment, the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen looked at the area where Han Fei was, and the corners of Xue Fan's mouth curled up, as if he was relieved. He said, "Sure enough, that place couldn't trap you. You still came." Han Fei shouted, "Don't even think about becoming a king." At that moment, Han Fei's body carried 100 wisps of chaotic energy, not for anything else, but for the Divine Son to still be alive. He accepted it. If the chaotic energy was gone, he could get more. If the person was gone, then it was really gone. He wanted to see how the Divine Son and the Water Deity would meet. Crack, boom, boom, crack, crack, crack. At that moment, the 9th lightning bolt fell from the sky. The void collapsed, the spiritual fruit exploded, and the chaotic energy exploded. In an instant, the world turned dark, and it was a terrifying scene. In an instant, the waves swept over more than 50,000 kilometers. Even the head of the Blood-Sea Divine Tree had been blown bald at this moment. Boom! The appearance of the Great Path cracks, and a downpour of blood rain fell. This was a sign that a venerable had fallen. However, this rain was not an ordinary venerable. Therefore, the moment the tear stain of the Great Path appeared, everyone was sure that this guy had finally fallen. The rolling waves didn't stop for a long time. In the sky, the thick lightning was still rolling and hadn't receded. At this moment, except for the Life Queen, the White Armor Emperor, and the Blood Sea Divine Wood, no other creatures could exist in the center of the explosion. Oh, there was one exception. Han Fei. Han Fei suddenly appeared from the void, and it was his real body. At that moment, he didn't have time to combine the two, so his body of black fog died together with Xue Fan. Han Fei waved at the Life Queen and said, "You're too late." However, the next moment, the dark clouds in the sky pressed down again, and the lightning appeared again. Han Fei only felt that he was suddenly facing a life and death crisis, and he subconsciously exerted the power of the Great Path to the fullest. He stomped his feet, and the coiled turtle array appeared. Boom! With a whip in the void, Han Fei was sent flying for 300 kilometers. At that moment, the heavenly tribulation descended again, directly enveloping Han Fei. In the lightning tribulation, a contemptuous voice sounded leisurely. "So, you think you've won?" Chapter 16:21. At this moment, everyone thought that Xue Fan was going to die. It was impossible for Xue Fan to survive under such a powerful bombardment. This battle had come to an end. But just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, a figure appeared, and without giving Han Fei any chance to react, he was directly involved in a brand new thunderbolt. Han Fei was shocked. Where did this lightning come from? Who the hell attacked me? The next moment, he heard the old turtle's voice. "Not good. The one who just passed the tribulation is the Blood King, the one who left the Forest of Horrors." The moment he attacked, the Blood Sea Divine Wood was exposed. It was shocked and said, "Xue Fan, you actually devoured your original body?" Ha ha! In the lightning tribulation, the sphere that everyone thought was Xue Fan's root suddenly cracked. A person who looked exactly like Xue Fan reappeared in the range of the lightning tribulation. Xue Fan laughed wildly. "I have 2 kings. How can I be free when I become a king alone? I have to thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have had the chance to swallow my original body. Fortunately, I planned to go through the tribulation today and dug out the remaining essence of you, Patriarch, and also dug out this hidden brat. Let me see, who could stop me now?" Han Fei had never met a person who could be so cunning. The relationship between the Blood King and Xue Fan was like the relationship between Tang Yin and Tang Ge. In fact, they were two independent individuals, but they had the same origin. In fact, the two could become kings together. In this way, they could even form a relationship of helping each other. It wasn't immoral for Xue Fan to swallow the Blood King. However, at least they didn't have to fight each other now. They could become kings together. As long as Xue Fan was willing to use the big black umbrella or his other trump cards, he might be able to survive the heavenly tribulation safely. However, Xue Fan didn't. In order to dig out Han Fei and the Divine Sun, he even abandoned his original body. Han Fei even suspected that his original body had been parasitized by this guy. When Han Fei fell into the lightning beam, the White Armor Emperor was shocked. The person who suddenly appeared was Han Fei. I just saw this kid pass the minor heavenly tribulation a few years ago. How many years has it been? This kid can participate in the Battle of Kings? Fortunately, Han Fei had been dragged into the heavenly tribulation by Xue Fan. Otherwise, if Han Fei had escaped, the White Armor Emperor would have immediately given up on hunting Xue Fan. Furthermore, the Blood Sea Heavenly would seem to have betrayed Xue Fan. As for why they betrayed him, there was no way to confirm this. However, the White Armor Emperor did not doubt the Blood Sea Divine would. Because tens of thousands of years before he became a king, he already knew about the Blood Sea Divine wood. At that time, there was no Blood Sea Divine wood city at all. At that time, the Blood Sea Divine wood was regarded as a strange place in the waterwood sky, and many people went there to explore it. Both the White Armor Emperor and the former Life Queen had seen the Blood Sea Divine wood. In fact, the Blood Sea Divine tree had given a lot of resources to many people, but didn't pose any threat to the sea race, the human race, or the insect race at this moment. The Life Queen's expression changed drastically. When she got the news from Han Fei, she was both shocked and speechless. Did Han Fei really sneak into the Blood Sea Divine wood city? Moreover, he had mastered many secrets. At this moment, the heavenly tribulation descended again. The White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen retreated quickly. Although Han Fei was involved in the heavenly tribulation, there was nothing they could do. Not everyone could touch the heavenly tribulation. If they dared to enter, they would be going against the great Tao and wouldn't get any benefits. At that moment, among all the people, only the Blood Sea Divine would stretched out a branch of the Blood Sea Divine wood, pierced through the heavenly tribulation domain, and struck the void, trying to free Han Fei. Xue Fan snorted coldly, and hundreds of Blood Sea Divine wood branches controlled by Xue Fan worked together to resist that one branch of the Blood Sea Divine wood. Xue Fan's voice was evil. If I had known, you wouldn't have been completely parasitized by me so easily. However, I have already controlled most of your power. You can't even protect yourself, and you still want to take people from me? Rumble, the first bolt of lightning rumbled and shattered. A large number of lightning arcs jumped and flickered on Han Fei's body. Han Fei was speechless. Who could have known that before his heavenly tribulation came, he would be forced to deal with other people's heavenly tribulations? And twice. Last time, there were only 6 bolts of lightning, but his flesh and blood directly collapsed, and his bones were almost broken. This time, although his strength had improved greatly and he had almost recovered to his peak state. However, he had just recovered to his peak state. Besides, it had only been a few months since his soul power recovered, and he had to deal with another heavenly tribulation. At this moment, when Xue Fan saw Han Fei's physique in the heavenly tribulation, he was also shocked and thought, this person's physique is so strong. He's just an advanced venerable, but he's completely fine after taking a king's tribulation. Is this a joke? At that moment, the heavenly tribulation enveloped 3 people. One was Xue Fan, one was Han Fei, and the last one was the Blood Sea Divine wood that was mistaken as Xue Fan by the heavenly tribulation. The Blood Sea Divine wood had no problem. His problem was how to cooperate with Han Fei to take down Xue Fan. But Han Fei seemed to be unable to protect himself now. Han Fei panicked as soon as he entered the heavenly tribulation. Shui Fan's King's Tribulation was completely different from Jin Zhonghai's King's Tribulation. If there was no accident, Han Fei didn't think he could make it through. Therefore, he needed to find shelter now. Han Fei wanted to use the star transposition technique to escape. However, under the heavenly tribulation, the star transposition technique was completely ineffective. At this moment, even if Shui Fan died immediately, as long as Han Fei was still alive, the heavenly tribulation wouldn't disappear. The heavenly Tao would assume that Han Fei had robbed Shui Fan's heavenly tribulation. Not only would it not become weaker, but it might even become stronger. Rumble, the second heavenly tribulation fell. Han Fei, who couldn't even take care of himself, naturally had no time to pick a fight with Shui Fan. And Shui Fan was also very cautious about his heavenly tribulation, so he didn't attack Han Fei. After all, they were all in the heavenly tribulation. Shui Fan thought that Han Fei would definitely die, so he didn't need to do anything. Puff! Look, crack, crack, crack. Sure enough, Shui Fan took the second heavenly tribulation more easily. And Han Fei, because his body hadn't recovered to the most perfect state, was directly hit into the sea by the heavenly tribulation. Han Fei's body was covered with cracks again, like a porcelain doll. It seemed that he could be destroyed at any time. Obviously, Han Fei didn't dare to be careless, nor did he care about his stiff and numb body. At this moment, all kinds of large arrays quickly formed around Han Fei. Although the arrays might not be that useful at this moment, he would block as many as he could. According to Han Fei's estimation, when the third heavenly tribulation fell, even if his body didn't collapse, it should be almost there. He couldn't survive the fourth heavenly tribulation. By then, even if he blocked it with the yin-yang wheel in the sky, it would be quite good if he could survive sixth heavenly tribulation. Seeing this, the Life Queen was also extremely nervous. This was a king tribulation. No matter how strong Han Fei was now, how could he resist a king tribulation? Sure enough, when the third heavenly tribulation fell, Shui Fan blocked it. Although most of his body had collapsed, he still had the strength to control some of the Blood Sea Divine with branches to fight against the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen. At this moment, the only thing that everyone could rejoice about was that the earth veins were almost completely destroyed. Shui Fan couldn't use anything anymore. When the heavenly tribulation fell, Han Fei wouldn't be so lucky anymore. Although his body had just recovered, although he managed to resist the third heavenly tribulation, his flesh and blood were scattered all over. The golden bones on his body were bright, and many parts of his bones were exposed. Seeing that Han Fei had actually withstood 3 heavenly tribulations with his body, even Shui Fan's expression changed. An advanced venerable, who hadn't reached the peak, could withstand his heavenly tribulation? Just how strong was this guy's physical body? If Han Fei's strength reached the half-king realm, it would be very easy for his body to survive 6 heavenly tribulations in a row, wouldn't it? Han Fei didn't use the Heaven Awakening Divine technique immediately. Han Fei knew that his Heaven Awakening Divine technique might be able to restrain Shui Fan's Great Path, or even his Big Black Umbrella. Since you dragged me into the King Tribulation, I dare to drag you to death. Therefore, Han Fei wouldn't use it easily unless it was a critical moment. Han Fei thought of something and shouted, "Blood Sea Divine Wood, how about we cooperate for the time being? Protect me, and I guarantee that this Shui Fan won't become a king." Han Fei's words were actually not to the Divine Sun, but to the White Armor Emperor. This White Armor Emperor seemed to be fighting fiercely, but he hadn't really hit much. At least the Life Queen was crazily destroying the pattern of the earth veins here. However, what did the White Armor Emperor do? Bombarding the air was like scratching an itch. Hearing Han Fei's words, a crystal-clear blood-colored twig shot in front of Han Fei. Shui Fan shouted, "Humph! Blood Sea Ancestor, I didn't want to kill you when I became a king because you helped me back then, so that you can be reincarnated. Now die, Thunder Tribulation Saber." In Han Fei's body, the chaotic energy collapsed, and his strength rose to the peak. In the Thunder Tribulation, the Saber prison ran rampant. Boom! The fourth thunderbolt fell, and the Bloodsea Divine would branch in Han Fei's hand, shattered with a crack. A blood-colored barrier blocked in front of him. Crack, crack, crack. Although cracks appeared on the blood-color barrier, the cracking speed was not fast. The fourth thunderbolt should be able to withstand it. On the other side, Xue Fan shouted at the Life Queen, "Ridiculous! Do you think you destroyed my earth veins?" Little do you know that the earth vein array of the Bloodsea Divine Wood City has never been the earth vein itself. It's the big red trunk. At this moment, once Xue Fan used the earth vein, the truth would be discovered immediately, so he might as well say it himself. Hum clatter. Within a radius of 10,000 kilometers, all the roots of the big red trunk suddenly began to absorb power in all directions, causing the big red trunk outside the Bloodsea Divine Wood City and even 300,000 kilometers away to provide energy to the center. It seemed that this Xue Fan had connected all the roots of the big red trunk into an intertwined energy network that extended in all directions like a power grid. Once the center needed it, the central array would quickly draw the energy of the big red trunk on the periphery. At this moment, a pillar of light shot into the sky from the bottom of the sea, shrouding Xue Fan. The red light and the thunder tribulation were alternating, and the energy ripples spread around the Bloodsea Divine would branch one after another, asking for votes. End of this chapter.